Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku had to relive it all part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story crayonying from Wattpad. So let's start the video. This book contains major spoilers for the manga. You have been warned. Otherwise, enjoy this book. Thank you. This was it. One last time. The green-haired boy stood in front of the blue archway in the late night rain. He remembered the first time he stood here, at the entrance of UA High School. It wasn't raining that time. Izuku wiped the tear-mixed raindrops off his face to no avail. His vision was still blurry, his cheeks still wet. Young Midoriya, a deep voice sounded from behind. You coming? Yeah, Izuku whispered. He stared at the bright lights in the distance coming from the dorms. They emitted a warmth Izuku could no longer feel. Can I just stay here for a while longer? Sure, kid. I'll be in the car. All Might's voice was filled with sympathy. Izuku wept silently as his mentor walked away. Even though the boy knew there was no other way to stop the villains, the pain of leaving his friends still jabbed at his heart like an icy cold dagger. Then a sharp feeling shot through his mind like a pin. It was the fourth's quirk, danger sense. Something was wrong. A sudden wave of fear washed over him, making it hard to breathe. Izuku leaped into the air and activated float. Danger sense screamed in Izuku's mind, impelling him to look up. That's when he saw the girl. No, it can't be 𝐎𝐸𝐽. Izuku propelled himself higher in the air to catch the silver-haired girl who was falling from the sky. 𝐎𝐸𝐽 was screaming, eyes closed, tears streaming. 𝐎𝐸𝐽, what the how in the world did you, pain? Pain bloomed in Izuku's chest, and he saw blood sprinkle on 𝐎𝐸𝐽's face. Izuku held back a scream. Two sharp red and black tendrils were sticking out of his chest. Blood was dripping down, falling towards the distant ground alongside the raindrops. A loud cackle boomed from behind Izuku. The boy froze solid. 𝐎𝐸𝐽 opened her eyes and whimpered. The tendrils were mere inches above her face. Her eyes, wide with horror, followed the tendrils to the place where they sprouted from Izuku's chest. She was shaking so hard Izuku worried she might explode. Ninth holder of One for All, Midoriya Izuku. The all-too-familiar voice said. All for one, Izuku said through gritted teeth. I thought it was my job to lure you out, didn't expect you to show up so quickly. All for One laughed. If killing you is the only thing I need to do to win, why not do it as soon as possible? Plus, I need that little girl's quirk to heal my body. I can't rule the world looking like a squashed potato, can I? The villain said that as if it were funny. Don't you dare lay a finger on 𝐎𝐸𝐽, Izuku spat, his head already racing for a plan. His grip tightened around the trembling girl. No, 𝐎𝐸𝐽 whispered, her eyes never leaving Izuku's wound. You're hurt again because of me. Izuku tried to relax his expression a bit. 𝐎𝐸𝐽, it's okay. I'll know. 𝐎𝐸𝐽 screamed. The horn on her forehead suddenly emitted a bright, yellow light. She was using her rewind quirk. But something was terribly wrong. The horn was growing bigger. Izuku's mind went blank. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her quirk had changed. All for one. Izuku bellowed, what did you do to her? The boy tried to move, but his body wouldn't budge. All for One was laughing maniacally. I'm not doing anything. It's all her. I simply expanded her vision. The light from 𝐎𝐸𝐽's horn was spreading into the air. It surrounded Izuku like a cage, the tendrils of light shining so bright it blinded Izuku. 𝐎𝐸𝐽, calm down. Izuku shouted, but he couldn't hear himself. Noise flooded his senses, and the world seemed to spin around him. Everything was chaos. Pain tore through his body. Then he felt nothing. Up, Izuku? A voice. Someone was calling his name. Izuku. Izuku's eyes flew open. He saw a ceiling. He blinked. Then he remembered. 𝐎𝐸𝐽 screaming, all for one laughing, his chest. Izuku touched his chest. There was no pain. But something felt weird. Izuku. The door slammed open. Izuku sat up. His mother was standing at the doorway. She looked kind of different. Izuku, you're gonna be late? Izuku. The boy looked around. Walls covered with All Might posters, a desk, a bookshelf. Reality settled in. This is my room. His mom frowned. You feeling good? Mom, Izuku blinked. Why am I here? His mom came up to him and placed a hand on his forehead. No fever. Are you okay? I feel fine, Mom. Izuku smiled, which eased his mother's worried expression. But you need to tell me. Izuku grabbed his mom's hand. How long was I out? What? His mom's eyebrows scrunched together. What am I supposed to say, since you fell asleep last night? Izuku could feel the confusion in the air. Fell asleep. What about Eri? Is she okay? Who's Eri? Mom, you know, the girl. Izuku sighed. Never mind, what about the villain I was fighting? Did you get him? His mom shook her head. I have no idea what you're talking about, Izuku. You probably had a bad dream. But Izuku's throat felt dry. He looked around again carefully. The walls, the posters, that one was the limited edition All Might poster, and Izuku was sure he had moved that to his dorm. He looked at his desk. Textbooks from junior high were scattered on it. He spotted his 13th hero analysis notebook, only without a scorched cover. It can't be. Izuku grabbed his phone from the desk and opened the calendar app. No, Izuku stared in horror and bewilderment. The date was from nearly 2 years ago. His mind went blank again. What? Izuku? Mom, this is today's date, right? Izuku held up his phone. His mom nodded with a confused expression. Izuku scrambled out of bed, into the bathroom, and stood in front of the mirror. What the hell? He stared at his reflection. It was the same Izuku, but he was skinny and young. His shoulders narrow, his limbs thin. The scars on his arm were completely gone. No, it can't be. If this wasn't a dream nor an illusion. Izuku shuddered at the thought. There have been stories about how quirks can evolve if their owners were in extreme fear or anger. A reawakening when facing a crisis. Eri's quirk had changed, but fundamentally, it couldn't have been completely different from her original rewind quirk. So the only possible explanation was, Eri's quirk had become able to rewind time itself. And Izuku was now 2 years back in time. Izuku really just wanted to go back to sleep, so he didn't need to think about anything. But of course, his mom got angry. You're not even sick. This is an important time in your life. You can't just skip school whenever you want to. Okay. Mom, calm down, I'm going to school. Izuku quickly went into his room and changed into his uniform before his mom could start lecturing him. The last thing he needed after apparent time travel is his mom yelling at him about the consequences of dropping out of middle school. After a quick bite of breakfast, Izuku followed the path in his distant memory to junior high. Along the way, he thought of the possibility of living his life again. If he couldn't find a way back, would he have to go through the exact same 2 years again? Every single moment. Then he realized how peaceful everything was now. There were heroes patrolling the streets. People were happy. They didn't know about the League of Villains yet. Or about All For One. Right now, All Might was still the #1 hero. 10 minutes later, Izuku arrived at his old classroom. His eyes scanned the room, looking for a single person. His gaze landed on the boy with spiky blonde hair. There he was, leaning back in his chair, feet propped up on the desk in front of him. Kakanta, what do you want, Dek? Bakugo Katsuki snapped. Izuku opened his mouth but no sound came out. The last time Izuku saw his childhood friend, both of them had been covered in BLD, sprawled on the battlefield after the war against the villains. Bakugo had saved Izuku's life. It was weird seeing Bakugo from 2 years ago again. His features were younger, his shoulders narrower. It was astonishing, really, just how much experience and time could change a person. Izuku realized, even the way Kaken looked at him would change completely after 2 years. But now, all there were in those red eyes were contempt and annoyance. Oide, are you ignoring me? No, sorry, never mind, Izuku said quietly. His thoughts traveled back to the war. So many lives were lost. So many innocent people getting hurt. All because Izuku couldn't defeat Shigaraki soon enough to prevent further damage. The pain was 1,000 times worse than any physical wound, and it seems like every time Izuku gets a bit stronger, his enemies get even more powerful. But Izuku was back. By this time, he had somewhat accepted the fact that he won't be getting back to his original time. And that meant all those mistakes he had made, all those lives lost because of his weakness, they could be saved. Midoriya. The sound of his name pulled him back to reality. Yes. Izuku up nervously. The silent room burst into laughter. Ha. A classmate Izuku somewhat remembered sneered, as if a quirkless nerd like you can get accepted into UA high school. Wait, what were we talking about? Izuku frowned. Then a shiver shot down his spine as he saw Bakugo get up from his seat. Then Izuku noticed the slight twitch in Bakugo's arm. Izuku darted out of his seat just as Bakugo slammed an explosion at Izuku's desk. Bakugo scowled, then smirked. Izuku tried not to roll his eyes. Deku, you worthless piece of 𝐎𝐻𝑇. You really think UA would accept someone like you when they can have me? Izuku had the sudden urge to flip his hair and say why not, but he didn't have a death wish. He couldn't possibly survive Bakugo's wrath. So instead, Izuku stared back at Bakugo, unfaltering, which made Bakugo narrow his eyes in surprise and anger. Some of their classmates gaped in fear and fascination, as standing up to Bakugo wasn't exactly the best idea. Kaken, I know I can't compete against you, at least not for now. Izuku took a step forward. But like you, my dream had always been to become a hero, and I will work even harder than you to achieve it. I can always try my best, can't I? Audible gasps sounded through the room. Some people whispered how Izuku was gonna die soon. Izuku took a deep breath. He didn't know much about time travel, but he did know that every single decision can lead to a great impact. Anything he did differently this time might cause even more devastating effects than the last time. Better to be safe than sorry. But on the other hand, he will never act cowardly in front of Bakugo again. Bakugo glared incredulously at Izuku, then laughed. I don't know what got into your head today, but you're acting weird. So be it then. I won't stop you if you want to commit suicide in the UA entrance exam. You'll never pass, you quirkless, defenseless nerd. He scoffs. Some of their classmates laugh as well, muttering quirkless and defenseless. And that's when it hit Izuku harder than ever. His top priority right now was to get his quirk, one for all. The moment class was dismissed, Izuku packed up and raced towards the door. But a hand grabbed Izuku's shoulder, yanking him back inside the classroom. Why you in a hurry, Deku? Bakugo turned Izuku around so they were face to face. My mom wants me back home. Izuku stepped back, but Bakugo hardened his grip. Here's a little word of advice, nerd. Bakugo said with a smile with no humor, don't even think about applying to UA, or else. Okay, I'll think about it, Izuku said distractedly, now excuse me, I need to go. Without another word, the green-haired boy ducked out of the blonde's grip and strode straight out the door, leaving Bakugo and his minions bewildered. Then Izuku ran non-stop until he arrived in front of a tunnel. He rested his hands on his knees as he gasped for air, chest heaving. Damn it, he muttered once he recovered. Weak was an understatement for his body right now. How can he possibly defeat his enemies if he had to catch his breath every few minutes? He turned his attention to the tunnel. He remembered that day when he took this different route back home to avoid Bakugo's bullying. Izuku had no idea back then that from this day forward, nothing would be the same. All Might would be here soon. But before that a rumble echoed from inside the sewer. Izuku braced himself. He had one plan. Stall the villain right here until All Might arrives. He couldn't let it run amok and wreak havoc around the city. There were civilians near here. Hopefully he doesn't die. Dark green slime seeped out from under the sewer lid, forming a massive blob of sludge. Then the villain turned towards the boy. Two evil red eyes glared at Izuku, and the villain's large, nasty smile widened. How lucky of me. Just what I need. It chuckled. The sludge villain lunged towards him like a flash flood, and Izuku leaped out of the way. Tendrils of disgusting mud stuff reached for the boy, but thanks to a year of hero training, Izuku managed to dodge them even with his fragile body. However, he was getting tired, his movements becoming sluggish. And if that wasn't bad enough, the villain was growing impatient. Barrages of sludge arm attacks rained down one after another, faster and stronger. Izuku gritted his teeth and forced himself to dodge faster, but too distracted by the limitations of his body, he miscalculated and tripped right into the villain's grasp. The slime closed around Izuku's body and squeezed the air out of him. He yelled and thrashed and struggled against the sludge with all his strength, but the villain just let out an annoyed grunt. "I assure you, little guy, it would hurt less if you stopped struggling. I'm just going to steal your body. It won't hurt long." Izuku felt the slimy substance making its way to his mouth. He turned his head as far away from it as possible, as if saving a few seconds could prevent the inevitable pain. If only he had his quirk. But before the villain could do anything else, there's the sound of the sewer lid bursting open and then the thump of 2 feet planting heavily on the ground. "Have no fear, you are safe," the familiar voice boomed, echoing in the tunnel. "I am here." Izuku couldn't help the smile on his face. "Texas smash!" All Might bellowed, his voice followed by an enormous shock wave that tore away the sludge's grip, blasting the villain into bits. Izuku flew back from the force and landed with a thump. He groaned and pulled himself up with his shaky limbs. All Might swiftly captured the villain in 2 plastic bottles, then shoved them into his pockets. "Sorry about that, normally I make sure bystanders aren't hurt, but boy, this city's sewer system sure is difficult to navigate," All Might said, then burst into laughter. Izuku's vision blurred. All Might noticed the tears in the boy's eyes and crouched panically. "You okay, young one? What's wrong?" The hero's arms hovered awkwardly as if he couldn't decide whether to pat Izuku on the shoulder or do a pose or something. "It's nothing," Izuku managed to choke out. He blinked the tears away. He just hasn't seen All Might in his muscular form for such a long time. "I'm fine." "WhatIf?" All Might stood straight again, towering over Izuku. "I need to get this dude to the police. See you later." "Wait. I need to talk to you about something," Izuku said. "Sorry boy, I love my fans really. But pro heroes are always fighting time as well as villains," All Might said while stretching his legs, preparing to take off. Izuku looked around swiftly. He took a deep breath. "It's about one for all." All Might froze. Time seemed to stop for a moment as Izuku held his breath. The hero turned towards the boy and stepped right in front of him, emitting a palpable force that made Izuku want to cower in fear. "Who are you?" All Might asked, his voice reverberating through Izuku's bones. It wasn't a question, it was a threat. The menace in the atmosphere made it hard to breathe. Izuku looked around once more to make sure no one could hear. Then he met All Might's gaze. "This is gonna sound crazy," Izuku said quietly, "but I'm your successor, the 9th holder of One for All." Yagi Toshinori did not believe this boy named Midoriya Izuku. Seriously, time travel. If that old demon All for One thinks he can send a boy, even with an appearance that screamed innocence, and steal one for all from the #1 hero, that villain had watched too many sci-fi movies. Toshinori slammed the door of his car shut. He sighed at his reflection in the window, the skeleton face that no one would ever recognize as the pillar of hope. But the boy knew. Yesterday at the tunnel, Midoriya blurted that he knew All Might's true appearance to keep the pro-hero from jumping away and abandoning the conversation. When Toshinori finally gave up and reverted back to his skinny form, sure enough, Midoriya wasn't surprised at all. Toshinori stepped onto the soft sand of the beach. The dim light of dawn cast a soft blue glow to the gentle ocean waves, its lulling sound floating in the air. This would have been an appealing scene if there weren't massive heaps of garbage everywhere. The boy told the hero to meet him here. After what Midoriya said, of course he had to come. But Toshinori was kind of confused. "Why are you pulling the trash?" Midoriya turned his large green eyes at Toshinori. "All Might, thanks for coming." And Midoriya looked back at the washing machine he was pulling with a gaze that seemed to analyze it. "Actually, believe it or not, it was originally your idea." Toshinori stayed silent for a while. "You're training?" "Yep. My body is a pile of sticks right now. I would actually die if I went to the UE entrance exam like this." After Midoriya said that, his expression distorted in frustration and distress. "Should I ask why you look like you want to die right now?" Toshinori raised an eyebrow. Midoriya leaned on the washing machine and sighed. "Imagine you built a tower out of blocks, and after almost 2 years of hard work, The moment you put the last block into place, everything crumbles down and you have to start all over again. The boy closed his eyes. I know what I'm capable of, but I can't do it right now. It's frustrating doesn't really cover it. Silence stretched between them as Midoriya started pulling the washing machine again. Finally, Toshinori asked, "Why do you want to go to 𝐎𝐸?" Midoriya stopped. "To get stronger. It's the best place for me to improve my skills, and with a year head start, I might be able to defeat All For One before everything escalates into a catastrophe. Maybe I can save everybody then. And I really want to see my friends again." The emotion in the boy's voice was so real Toshinori couldn't find a way to disbelieve it. Maybe this Midoriya Izuku boy was worth trusting. After that day, things progressed. Izuku spent a few days coming up with a plan that would make sure he would at least be able to use 5% of One for All by the time of the entrance exam. Well, not that he was 100% sure All Might would give it to him anyway, because first, Bakugo's sludge villain incident didn't happen, so the event that proved Izuku worthy wasn't there. Izuku knew Bakugo being safe was a good thing, but it's making him nervous now. Second, Izuku was pretty sure All Might thought he was a spy for All For One or something. Maybe Izuku was a bit too reckless. When Izuku finalized his training plan, his long journey towards the entrance exam begun. Every morning Izuku would bring his rope to the beach park and start clearing away the trash. Sometimes All Might was there, sometimes he wasn't. If the hero was there, sometimes he would watch silently, sometimes he would give some tips. Izuku was grateful for his presence and was happy the hero was warming up to him. On school days, Izuku would work out every chance he got, and in order not to waste the 7 crappy hours of his life, he used class time to plan things out. All the terrible things that would happen in the future, plans to prevent them and plans to get stronger. Plans, plans, plans. Do you have something to say, Midoriya? Izuku looked up. The entire class was staring at him. Izuku thought, what? He slowly closed his planning notebook and pretended to pay attention. The teacher sighed. Midoriya, meet me in the office after class. Izuku nodded and sighed. He caught a glimpse of Bakugo's inscrutable expression. The blonde boy then turned back to face the front of the classroom. After class that day, Izuku went to the teacher's office, sacrificing precious training time. Why aren't you paying attention in class, Midoriya? The teacher asked. If this continues, we may have to ask your mom to come and talk. I'm sorry, I won't do it again, Izuku replied automatically. Look, Midoriya, I'm a teacher. So I need to make sure you're doing okay. I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be? You're always so stressed. Every time you look into that notebook of yours, you look like you're facing the end of the world, the teacher said with a worried expression. Izuku blinked. Was that how he looked like? Sensei, I assure you I'm doing great. I mean, my grades are fine, right? I'm not talking about your perfect grades, Midoriya. I'm talking about. The teacher seemed to hesitate. Are you sure you want to apply to UA? It's clearly stressing you out. With your circumstance, I don't think applying to a hero school is a wise choice at all. You don't need to worry about me, Izuku said with a voice so cold it surprised himself. His teacher seemed a bit shocked as well. There was silence, then Izuku bowed slightly to his teacher. I promise I'll pay attention in class from now on, and I promise whatever stress I have, it will not affect my academic performance. Thank you for your concern, Sensei. Izuku said. The teacher just nodded reluctantly, then dismissed Izuku. From that day on, Izuku made sure to keep track of what the class was learning, and whenever the teachers asked questions he answered as close as he could. At home he spent as much time with his mother as possible, to keep her from worrying. But still, he couldn't help but notice the concerned glances his mother threw him from now and then. Weeks passed, and Izuku's body became stronger and stronger, but not nearly as fast as he wanted. There were multiple times where he overworked himself so badly he was forced to take a break, so he tried his best to limit himself. And that part was torture. A few months before the exam, he finally broke down. He was on his morning jog along the beach, and suddenly he just broke. He didn't even remember what he was thinking. He was just suddenly overwhelmed with a wave of rage and distress. He collapsed on the sand and screamed. He screamed until his throat was sore and his lungs ached. He sat there, and he felt an abyss in his body. emptiness threatening to devour his soul. Then he felt a hand on his shoulder. Izuku looked up and saw All Might's kind eyes. Wordlessly, All Might kneeled down and wrapped his arms around Izuku. The boy buried his face in the hero's shoulders. They embraced in silence for a while, the sound of the waves gradually calming the boy down. But the pain and emptiness were still there. "What is it all for, All Might?" Izuku finally said. "That's something only you know. But I don't know anymore." All Might sighed and pulled back to meet Izuku's eyes. "Listen, kid. You know how hard a hero's path is. But my mentor once told me, when you feel like you're at your limit, remember where you started at the beginning, remember the reason you swing your fist." The hero said firmly, "Why are you doing all this?" "I always wanted to be a hero." "Then that answers your question." All Might said. "But it's too hard. I lost everything I accumulated for 2 years. And now I know what will happen in the future. I finally realized how pointless everything is. No matter how hard I think I try, horrible events just happen one after another. People have died, All Might died. And it's all because," Izuku's voice cracked, "it's all because I wasn't strong enough. Really bad things are going to happen soon, and I won't be able to prevent them if I can't get my stupid body to work." "Ah, yes, assignments are always more stressful when the deadline is near, right?" "What?" "It is especially this time that you need to stay calm. Panicking and overworking won't get you anywhere." "Then what should I do?" "Take a few days off. You're mentally drained. Once you're back to normal, then I'll officially help you train." "But," Izuku sighed, "fine. I guess I can use some help." All Might nodded. "Remember, I'll help you, but only if you take a real break." Izuku smiled. "Thanks, All Might. You're the best." "Well, I'm not number one for nothing," the hero joked. The moment Izuku arrived home, he noticed his mother's expression. "Izuku, I need to talk to you." "Yeah, I kinda wanted to talk as well." Izuku took a seat on the couch. "Well, let me speak first." His mom clasped her hands together. "I've been really worried about you lately. Are you okay?" He stopped himself and looked away. "No," he whispered. "Izuku baby, look at me." His mom gently lifted his face to meet her gaze. "It's okay. Whatever you're going through, know that I'm always here for you." That's when Izuku realized sometimes when people were locked in a cage, no amount of sheer force can break through. It was the most simple key that unlocked it. Tears flowed uncontrollably, and before Izuku knew it, he was bawling his eyes out in his mother's embrace. He cried like a 5-year-old, while his mom just gently patted him on the back. When he was finally cried out, his mom handed him a cup of warm tea. He drank it, feeling relieved for the first time since he traveled back in time. February 26th. The day of the UA entrance exam. Izuku wiped the sweat off his face, stood up straight, and looked proudly at the result of his hard work. The beach was spotless. The early rays of sunshine peeked from the horizon, casting a long glow across the gentle waves. He did it. Then suddenly Izuku heard a distant voice behind him shouting, "Oh my goodness." He turned back to see muscular All Might sprinting towards him at full speed. If it were for anyone else, this would be a very intimidating moment. "Midoriya, my boy," All Might said once he skidded to a stop in front of Izuku, "I've only been gone for a few days and now the beach is absolutely clean." "You did it." "Yeah, but I still have a long way to go," Izuku said as he threw away the garbage bag filled with the last tiny pieces of garbage he cleaned up this morning. When he turned back to All Might, the hero was looking very serious. Wordlessly, the hero plucked a piece of golden hair from his head and dramatically held it in front of Izuku. The boy stared at it for a moment, then looked up at the hero with determination. He carefully took the hair. "I won't let you down, All Might. You deserved it." The hero nodded. "I now know why I chose you as my successor. You just don't give up. However, you really should listen to me and stop overworking yourself." "If I don't, there will be people I can't save," Izuku said. "You will become a great hero." "Well, if you aren't already one." All Might said, "Now." Then a breeze flowed past the two and they both shrieked when the hair slipped from Izuku's fingers and disappeared after falling on the sand. "I think I dropped it." Izuku blinked. "Can I have another one?" Then they both burst out laughing while All Might plucked another hair for Izuku, and the boy choked it down. 8:40 a.m. Izuku arrived at UA and started crying. "What the hell's wrong with that guy?" someone whispered, staring at Izuku like he was some kind of lunatic. "Should look away," someone else hissed. Izuku ignored them. They didn't know that he hasn't seen UA in more than 10 months. The last time he came here, he was leaving all his friends and family in search of the villains. The blue glass building, the trees, the road. "Get out of my way, Deku." Izuku bounced out of the way instinctively. Bakugo scoffed and walked past Izuku. "Hey, Izuku said, "you probably don't need it, but good luck." "Huh," Bakugo sneered, "as if I want your pathetic luck." Izuku just sighed as his childhood friend walked away into the building. Then out of the corner of his eye, Izuku spotted a familiar figure, and he almost started crying again. The brunette was wearing a pink scarf, her cheeks pink. She noticed Izuku looking at her and smiled. Really nerve-wracking, right? Uriaraka stopped in her tracks next to Izuku and said, "Yeah?" Izuku stuttered. "Well, I guess I'll see you inside." Uriaraka waved and walked away. "Good luck?" Izuku beamed. Izuku sat next to Bakugo for the orientation. He listened to present Mick's explanation of the robot exam, but he already knew about it and had been planning strategies for weeks. And soon Izuku was standing in front of the large entrance gate to the battle center. The entrance exam will start in a few minutes. Izuku couldn't help but feel nervous, even though he knew exactly what to expect. "Okay, calm down. As long as I make sure I get the exact same points as last time, nothing will change," he muttered, quiet enough that no one knew what he was saying, but loud enough that earned him a few weird glances. "If I don't compete against the people that will get accepted, their futures won't be altered." Izuku peeked at Ida, Uriaraka, and Aoyama. They looked a lot younger as well, not yet weary from the terrible events about to happen. "Dude," someone with hair that looked like a traffic cone whispered to his friend, "that's the weird dude who cried at the front gate, right?" "He looks so nervous, man," the friend whispered back. "Huh," the traffic cone guy snickered, "at least we have one less rival to worry about." Izuku just rolled his eyes. "Then present," Mike screeched from a watchtower. "Okay, start." The students standing in front of the mock city hall looked towards Mike with confused faces, but Izuku didn't waste another second. He rushed inside the mock city, the other candidates following a split second later. The other candidates immediately started searching for robot villains, but Izuku did something else first. He felt inside his body and searched for one for all. His body technically never used it yet, but Izuku laughed out loud almost hysterically when he felt the familiar, yet non-familiar presence of his quirk inside his body. "Yes," he yelled, tendrils of green lightning flashing around his body. He was so happy he could cry now. Then an explosion erupted in the wall next to him and a one-point robot came into view. The metal head whirred towards him, its red eye glinting. Way too eager to use his quirk again, Izuku jumped up into the air and sent a forceful roundhouse kick towards the robot. The metal crumpled on impact and the robot splintered to pieces, smoke rising from the remains. 1 point down, 59 more to go. Izuku landed on the ground and suddenly a piercing pain shot through his leg. "Oh see," Izuku gritted his teeth, "this stupid body can't take anything more than 5% shoot." He decided to ignore the pain just like he always did, a skill he picked up after surviving countless splintering bones. But he knew his training in the past 10 months had taken effect. Getting 1 point was already a lot better than last time. "Well, guess I'll just have to trust the process," Izuku muttered, then activated his quirk again and leaped away, looking for his next target. For the next few minutes, Izuku destroyed one robot after the other, careful not to affect the scores of the people he recognized and staying out of their ways. Izuku tried out different techniques and tested out the limits of his body and quirk. He realized he couldn't use any of the other quirks of One for All, though, as they were probably still dormant. 46. Izuku kicked off a wall and propelled himself directly towards a 3-point robot, then destroyed it instantly with a punch. Then someone cursed behind him, and Izuku looked back to see the person with the hair that looked like a traffic cone. This was the guy who snickered at Izuku behind his back at the gate of the mock city. "Damn it, I saw that one first," the traffic cone guy snapped. Then his angry expression froze in fear. Izuku's kick was flying straight towards the guy's head. But instead of connecting with his head, the green-haired boy's kick collided hard with another 3-point robot behind the traffic cone guy. Izuku landed deftly behind him, and the robot crashed to the ground. The guy turned around stiffly, his eyes wide in shock. "Oh, sorry," Izuku said without looking at the guy. "Might have ruined that hairstyle of yours, traffic cone guy." "What? Traf?" Izuku tilted his head and looked back, and the guy went silent. "Ignore me," Izuku smiled, "since I'm just one less rival to worry about, right?" The guy clenched his jaw and took a step back. Some other kids near them all sent nervous looks towards Izuku. But then there's the sound of a huge explosion and Izuku saw smoke erupt from the middle of the training ground. It was the 0-point robot. A giant shadow loomed over the mock city and the candidates near Izuku all started yelling and retreating at the sight of the towering green robot. But of course, Izuku ran straight towards it. That was 𝐸𝐸's first thought when he saw the boy with fluffy green hair running straight towards the 0-point robot. For a moment 𝐸𝐸 was tempted to stop and see what the boy was up to, but he knew it was pure stupidity. So instead, like everybody else, 𝐸𝐸 ran away. Uraraka Ochaco whimpered at the pain as she tried to pull herself out of the rubble. She tried to reach back and use her quirk on the giant fragment of concrete, but she was crushed in a way that her fingers couldn't touch the rubble no matter how hard she tried. She just needed a little bit more time to get out, but the humongous robot was coming closer and closer and she knew she couldn't possibly make it out in time, but she was trying so hard and there was a flash of green light and the figure of a boy appeared in front of her. It was the boy she met at UA's front gate, the boy with freckles and messy green hair. This morning he looked like a jumpy nerd, but right now, with green lightning around him and a determined expression, he looked like a hero. "Hang on." The boy cleared away the rubble with inhuman speed, and once most of the weight was free from her back, she floated the largest fragment and scrambled out. The boy grabbed Ochaco and darted out of range just as the giant robot crushed the place where she was trapped before. "Are you okay?" the boy asked with unmasked worry. "Yeah," Ochaco said as the boy set her down. Thank you." The boy was about to reply when something caught his eye. She turned to see what he was so shocked at and she realized the giant robot had lifted a hand and was about to slam down. "Come on, let's get out of here." Ochaco shrieked and started running away, but the boy didn't move. "What are you?" She looked around without stopping, then realized with a shudder that the robot hand was going to smash into the buildings around them, and the structures would collapse. "Go. Run faster." The boy yelled at her. "But what about you?" Ochaco stopped in her tracks and yelled back. The boy looked around and gritted his teeth. There were other candidates in the vicinity, and they couldn't possibly make it out in time. They would get seriously hurt by the giant robot. Green lightning, much brighter than the last time, Ochaco realized, appeared around the boy, and he dropped to a low stance. "You won't be able to make it," Ochaco shrieked, but the boy flashed away towards the other candidates. Ochaco felt her jaw drop open. The boy was a blur, no, even faster than that. He was so fast he seemed to be teleporting. The robot hand was coming down fast, but the boy was still grabbing all the candidates below it. She had to do something. The boy was saving everyone. She had to help. She looked around and lunged towards a giant slab of concrete, making it weightless with her quirk. She grabbed the concrete and hefted it up like an oversized baseball bat, then smashed it up at the robot hand. The robot hand back, but recovered a split second later. It lifted up slightly, then slammed down even harder. Ochaco leaped out of the way just as the giant metal thing collided into the ground behind her. The buildings in the area were demolished, smoke billowing everywhere, rubble flying. Ochaco whirled around and searched for the boy while coughing in the thick, dusty smoke. Then she saw a flash of green light and dashed towards it. "Oh my God!" Her hands covered her mouth. The boy was laying on the ground, breathing heavily, while 7 or 8 other candidates sat shakily near him, all with expressions of astonishment and fear. "He saved all of them." Ochaco breathed. "Hey," the boy suddenly said to her, "thanks back there. The few seconds you bought me really helped a lot. I mean, you saved me and you were trying so hard to save everyone else, so I knew I had to do something." Ochaco ran a hand through her hair, feeling embarrassed. Time's up. Present, Mike screeched, signaling the end of the exam. 𝐻𝐸𝐵 marched over to the crowd. The green-haired candidate was lying on his back. Is everyone okay? The green hair said with a painful groan as if he was trying to get up but couldn't. The few other candidates standing near the green-haired boy nodded. Tenya's eyes widened in surprise. Obviously, at the prestigious 𝐻𝐸𝐽 High School, candidates won't get seriously injured at the entrance exam. Didn't the green-haired boy know that? Why in the world did he try to help other candidates if everybody here was competing against each other? It's not like they would have died if he didn't save them. Then Tenya realized, maybe they died if the giant robot villain was real with an intent to kill. If this wasn't an exam, real heroes would have tried their best to help others. Tenya thought, so maybe this crazy, weird, green-haired candidate was actually the best hero here. The green hair lifted a shaky arm. Tenya listened intently with newfound curiosity and admiration towards the candidate. Can someone get Recovery Girl over here? The boy asked. I probably broke some bones. Tenya blinked, then shook his head. 1 week after the exam. Izuku. His mom screamed, holding out the white envelope with her trembling hand. Your decision letter is here. Izuku was so nervous he was sure his heart would explode. 49 villain points, unknown rescue points. If he didn't get in, he was a disgrace to 𝐻𝐸𝐽. He went there for a year of school, for goodness sake. He had the most experience out of everyone there at the exam, even if his body wasn't used to his quirk yet. If only he didn't hurt his leg at the very beginning, or if he did more during the 10 months of training. Izuku shook the thought away. It was too late for regrets. He did his best, and that's what mattered. In his room, he took a deep breath and tore open the envelope. A small projector lit up, and All Might appeared in the hologram. Hello, young man. The hero said with his usual, gigantic grin. Izuku smiled nervously. Hey All Might. Okie doke, here comes the exciting moment for your status update. Are you stressed? Just get to the point. All Might cleared his throat. Congratulations. You have passed the entrance exam and have been admitted to 𝐻𝐸𝐽 High School. Izuku let out a breath of relief, eyes watering. The last 10 months had been really hard for his mind. Even though he knew he had a pretty good chance of getting in, the small possibility of not getting accepted had always lurked in the back of his mind. But it was relieving. He was one step closer to defeating the villains. Wait, what were my scores? Izuku asked. You passed the written exam with a pretty good score, and for the practical test, 49 villain points, very impressive. But most breathtaking, 47 rescue points, making 96 points in total, placing number 1 in the entrance exams this year. What? Izuku shot up from his seat. He started panicking a bit. Really, he was grateful for the high rescue points, but if he was in first place, what about Bakugo? If Izuku knew anything about Bakugo, is that Kaken would not be happy with this. The future was already starting to change. And for the first time since coming back, Izuku had no idea what would happen. Izuku opened the door, and his mother turned to him anxiously. He smiled and told her he got in. Oh. His mom covered her mouth with her hands, tears sparkling in her eyes. She then pulled Izuku into a tight hug and cried in joy. In the evening, Izuku met All Might at the beach again. The sun was gone, only a dim purple light remaining in the atmosphere. The sky was an appealing, deep blue. Congrats, young Midoriya. Skinny All Might hugged Izuku. I watched you in the observation room, and I gotta say, any last scrap of doubt I had in you dissipated. The way you use one for all, it's clearly a part of you already. Even so, I couldn't have done it without you. You changed my life forever. The hero laughed. Well, work hard, young man. And remember, don't be too reckless. With knowledge from the future, you have an advantage. Don't lose it. What the hell did you do? Did you have some sort of advantage? You cheated, didn't you? Bakugo snarled as he slammed Izuku into the wall. They had just come out of the main office, where their teachers praised both of them for getting into the best hero school in Japan. Kaken, shut up, you demon nerd. Bakugo grabbed the hem of Izuku's uniform. Now tell me, word by word, how the hell did you get into 𝐻𝐸𝐽? Most of all, how did you get a score higher than me? Bakugo leaned in close, his face only inches apart from Izuku's. Izuku had never seen such hatred in Bakugo's eyes. What did you do to cheat? Bakugo growled. Izuku clenched his fists nervously. Not because of Bakugo's killing glare, but because the blonde boy was much angrier than last time. Last time Bakugo got the highest score. But Izuku, the previously skinny, pathetic nerd Deku, suddenly getting the highest score in the UE entrance exam. That was simply impossible. Answer me. Bakugo hollered, blasting an explosion in the side of Izuku's face. Izuku let him. The explosion burned his cheek and made his head spin. His eyes defocused, black spots swimming. Kaken, Izuku took a deep breath. I got my quirk. Silence. As if I believe that, Bakugo scoffed, letting go of Izuku's shirt. Show me then, you liar. Izuku activated his quirk, and the dark corner they were standing in lit up from the green glow of One for All. Izuku leaped into the air, at least 2 stories tall. When he landed, Bakugo's face went from shock to utter disbelief, then to rage. You've been tricking me all this time? Bakugo lifted a palm, sparks flying. Kaken, listen, it was really sudden for me too. It literally happened right before the exam. Lie again and I'll blow your face off, Bakugo threatened. Your quirk randomly, impossibly manifesting doesn't make you better than me. Fight me, I'll prove you cheated. Fine, Izuku said, beat me up however you want if that makes you feel better. Bakugo's eyes widened. What? It's reality? Izuku asserted, I did not cheat. If I had to take the test again, I'd still get in. You can't stop me. I'm going to that school and becoming a hero whether you like it or not. Bakugo yelled, his shoulders trembling in anger. He then blasted Izuku in the stomach with an explosion. Izuku grit his teeth, his mind tore between whether he should fight back or not. He decided not to. Bakugo glared coldly at Izuku again. I'm gonna destroy you at you. Hey, the blonde boy said. Izuku stayed silent, and Bakugo walked away. April, you got everything you need. Izuku's mom circled around him nervously at the doorway of their apartment. Yeah, Mom. Izuku put on his trusty red shoes and straightened his UA uniform. His mother smiled proudly at him with tears in her green eyes. Seeing her like this, Izuku started tearing up as well. You okay, Izuku? Izuku pulled his mother into a hug. Just thank you so much for always being there for me. I promise, whatever happens during my hero training, I will never let you worry. I love you, Izuku. Love you too. Izuku looked up at the huge 1A door. Fading memories came back to life as he pushed open the door, and the usual urge to cry resurfaced. There were all his classmates. He recognized all of them, all of his friends. Izuku couldn't be more relieved that his improved entrance score did not affect which students were in this class. Bakugo and Ida were still yelling at each other when Ida spotted Izuku. It's him, Ida said, and everyone turned to Izuku. Hi, guys, Izuku smiled. Ida marched over like a robot. Greetings, I'm Ida Tenya. Izuku waved. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Nice to meet you, I guess. Then he heard someone mutter, wait, that's the guy who placed first in the entrance exam. I heard he surpassed second place by nearly 20 points. Seriously? Izuku ignored the whispers of his classmates. Hey, I recognize that messed up hair. A cheerful voice chirped, and Izuku turned to see Uraraka standing at the door. You're the nice boy that saved me at the exam. Your quirk is so cool. Izuku smiled. Thanks, I'm really happy you were accepted as well. She nodded, then tilted her head. I wonder if we're gonna do anything apart from orientation? He smiled wryly at her question. We're probably not even gonna have orientation. Uraraka looked very confused. She was about to say something when a deep, zombie-like voice interrupted her. If you're here to make friends, you should just go back home. The voice made Izuku jump, and he lowered his gaze to the ground. There he was, Aizawa-sensei, in his yellow sleeping bag. Black, long and disheveled hair spilled across his face. Aizawa stood up slowly, then introduced himself and pulled out the blue gym uniform. Put these on and go outside. Izuku forced himself not to laugh at the other 19 confused faces in the room. Nobody here ever knew what hardships Yue and Aizawa-sensei would be throwing at them. On the field, Aizawa introduced the Quirk apprehension test. You've been taking physical exams your entire lives, But you've never got to use your quirks before. Izuku stopped listening for a moment but suddenly stiffened when Aizawa called his name. Midoriya, the teacher said in his monotone voice, you managed to get the most points on the entrance exam. What was your farthest distance throw with a softball in junior high? Izuku stood stupefied. How can he remember that? He didn't have a junior high physical test since, well, chronologically, 2 years. The last physical test was this exact one, but a year ago. Midoriya. I don't remember. I'd say 40-something meters, maybe less. Izuku answered a most appropriate estimate for his previous stick figure self. Try doing it with your quirk this time. Aizawa handed him the ball. Deku took the ball in his sweaty palm. It seemed to weigh 1,000. This didn't happen last time. A couple of feet away, Bakugo was on the verge of killing Izuku on the spot. Huh, the blonde boy scoffed, his arms crossed. See if you can use that stupid quirk of yours, you loser. Ida overheard and frowned. Very unsportsmanlike, Bakugo. Bakugo ignored him. Izuku made his way to the circle marked on the ground, sneaked a glance at his childhood friend one last time, then pulled back his arm. With around 4% of 1 for all, Izuku threw the ball out like a catapult. A few seconds later, Aizawa's device beeped, and the teacher showed everyone Deku's score. 666, 6 meters. The class gasped. Bakugo wrinkled his face. His mouth was pressed in a thin line and his eyes pierced Izuku like twin daggers. Deku, 𝐹***King B. Bakugo stomped up to Izuku. If I ever found out you were holding back, you're dead? I wasn't, Izuku lied. Izuku was sure he would die instantly if his childhood friend knew the true strength of his quirk. Hey, Aizawa dragged Bakugo away from Izuku, you're wasting my time. We will start the exam. The teacher turned to the rest of the class. By the way, all of you, UA is not a place to do whatever you want, and it will definitely not be fun. The person who comes last in this physical exam will be expelled. Everyone gasped and shouted in disbelief. Someone was yelling a protest, but Izuku wasn't listening. It won't be long until Bakugo finds out about OFA. It may be best to tell him about it sooner rather than later. Midoriya, Aizawa pulled Izuku aside as the rest of the class gathered to the running track. This test is to determine your quirk's upper limit, and I cannot tolerate lazy attempts. Keep in mind that you must try your best in order to succeed. Izuku tensed, then nodded. Aizawa must have realized Izuku reduced his power in the throw. In the later tests, in order not to look like he's slacking, while at the same time keeping his still weak body in check, Izuku used around 6% of his power for all the tests and got pretty good scores. So with the help of OFA strengthening his body, he ranked 4th, right after Bakugo. Damn it. Who placed in front of me? Bakugo was yelling at someone. At least he wasn't directly angry at Izuku. On the other end of the ranking list, Mineta was shaking so hard his teeth clattered. If I get expelled, I won't be able to see all the UA girls. Izuku smacked Mineta on the back, not wanting to hear the rest of the short boy's sentence. Oh, and, Aizawa said nonchalantly, I was lying. No one's going home today. Mineta blinked, then let out a sigh of relief. Bad move, Izuku muttered quietly. After school, Ida caught up to Izuku. Nice job today, Midoriya, the taller boy said, you really have the skills and a powerful quirk. Thanks, Izuku said, your quirk is really cool as well. I mean, just imagine the possible moves you can. Hi. Uraraka ran up to the two boys and interrupted Izuku's mumbling. Oh, you're the girl who got infinity for the softball throw. Ida said. I'm Uraraka Ochaco, she said. You're Ida Tenya, and she knitted her eyebrows at Izuku. You're Midoriya, Deku, right? That's what that grumpy guy always calls you. He nervously ran a hand through his curly hair. My name's actually Izuku, Kaken just likes to call me Deku to make fun of me, he then smiled, but I don't really see it as an insult anymore. It gives off a kind of I can do it vibe, you know. Uraraka's eyes brightened. Wow. That's exactly what I was thinking. Sorry I mistook it for your name, though. It started as an insult from Bakugo. Huh, that's very disrespectful. Ida said. The three of them talked all the way to the station. The sun was setting, splashing colorful gradients across the sky. Birds chirped, trees rustled, and the sea glittered in the distance. Izuku was grateful for his friends and the peacefulness. How much he hoped it would last. It was the second day of school, and Izuku didn't know if he made the right decision. He should have called in sick or something. Whatever he did, he should not have shown up to the battle trial training. He knew how badly this would end. But he stepped into ground beta anyway, knowing he had no choice. The gray buildings and roads of the mock city stretched to the horizon and seemed to tower over Izuku as if watching and criticizing his every move. But then he saw his friends, all waiting there in their hero costumes, and his uneasiness seemed to drift away for a moment. Deku. Uraraka spotted Izuku, eyes sparkling, and nearly squealed, "Oh my gosh, I love your costume. It looks so pro." Her voice attracted many of the other students, who all gaped at Izuku's attire. Last time, Izuku did not submit a Quirk registration form for a costume. But now, with a very clear idea in mind, he requested a costume as close to his old one as possible. If Izuku had to describe it, it looked pretty similar to his costume during the provisional license exam: black iron soles, white arm braces. However, he did exclude most of the complex garments meant for supporting his higher-level powers, since he needed to look like a newbie. Plus, his body wasn't strong enough to withstand some of his previous moves. But he especially made sure the original design of his first-ever costume, a gift from his mother, was kept. Ida waved his arms stiffly. "Midoriya, I hope you at least pay attention in afternoon classes, or you will fail for sure." What do you mean? You know what I'm saying. Don't fall asleep during hero training. I don't know. Izuku remembered. This morning, the classes were so boring Izuku fell asleep probably 2 or 3 times. Unlike middle school, UA teachers were like hawks, and there was no other option apart from paying attention in class, so Izuku couldn't really do anything else. But anyway, that's what listening to the same lecture twice does to you, Izuku learned. It makes you real drowsy. All Might gave an introduction of the combat training, 2v2 indoor battles, and drew the lots. It was the exact same as last time, with Izuku pairing up with Uraraka, fighting against Bakugo and Ida. The uneasiness Izuku felt earlier burst back to life, and the memory of the match started replaying in his mind again. Bakugo gave Izuku a death glare, but Izuku steadily met Bakugo's gaze, which made the blonde boy scowl even deeper. As Bakugo and Ida went inside the building, Izuku memorized the floor plan with Uraraka. "You know," Izuku suddenly said, startling her, "I used to be really afraid of going against Kaken." "Used to?" she asked. He flinched at that. Maybe still a little now. Well, I mean, the impression he gave me throughout my childhood really left an imprint, but it's because of him, his confidence, his quirk, his talent, because he's so strong, that I became determined to become better than him. If not for him, I wouldn't be here today." Izuku didn't know why he said all that, but it felt nice to express his feelings. "I'm sorry I said all that. You don't need to worry about it." He suddenly realized that Uraraka, not yet close friends with him, might not want to hear all this. "It's okay. You say that as if Bakugo saved your life," Uraraka said jokingly, "which I will find hard to believe. He seems like he would find every chance to murder you or something. At least, that's what he always says." Izuku just nodded and sighed. Bakugo did in fact save his life later on, and nearly died because of that. "It's okay, we'll win. No matter how strong Angry Face is." Uraraka cheered. "Yeah, we will," Izuku said. He just hoped he won't mentally break his childhood friend. And the first mock battle of the year began. Izuku already knew where the fake weapon was, but he didn't want to look like he cheated, so he took the same route they did last time. Their footsteps echoed through the dim hallways. As they neared the place where Izuku knew Bakugo would jump out and ambush them from, the green-haired boy signaled for his teammate to stop and listen carefully. Sure enough, there was the muffled sound of boot heels, and Bakugo leaped out. The explosion of his quirk seemed to rock the entire building. Its sound pierced Izuku's eardrums. But the hero team was prepared and dodged easily to the side. "Uraraka, go. Stick to the plan." Izuku shouted and threw himself in between Bakugo and the girl, who scrambled off immediately. Bakugo didn't even try to chase her. "You think you can take me on alone?" Bakugo hissed. Izuku peeked behind him to see if Uraraka was gone. "Ha!" Bakugo gave a bark of laughter. "Go to hell, Deku." Izuku looked back at his childhood friend, but quicker than a breath, Bakugo was in front of Izuku, his palm glowing dangerously. Strengthening his body, Izuku leaped above and over Bakugo, then flicked his finger at the blonde boy's back, creating a beam of air that knocked Bakugo off balance, making him trip. Izuku propelled himself towards Bakugo, who turned around, his palm already building up an explosion. Bakugo was good, but Deku had a year of experience ahead of him. Easily seeing through his move, Deku turned abruptly, flashed towards Bakugo's side, and kicked off the wall, using the rebound force to send a strengthened punch to Bakugo's side. Bakugo landed HRD on the ground. "By the way," Izuku said calmly as the other boy hauled himself up on his elbows, "I know you don't care, but I've changed my opinion on the name of Deku." Izuku took out the capture tape, but Bakugo was already up, his chest heaving hard. Izuku's brows furrowed as Bakugo hooked a finger on the trigger of his grenade-like gauntlet. "Kaken, stop. You don't want to do this," Izuku said, but knew it was useless and prepared to dodge the explosion anyway. "It's gonna cause a huge amount of damage to the building. Shut up." Bakugo pulled the trigger, and the sound of All Might's warning from the broadcast was drowned out by an earth-shattering explosion. Izuku launched himself sideways to dodge, but he made a mistake. His body, still pretty weak, was literally blown off balance by the wind force of the explosion. Izuku tumbled across the floor, which had rubble scattered all across it, blown apart by the explosion. Sunlight spilled in from a giant hole in the side of the building. Izuku barely had time to stand up straight when Bakugo blasted directly at him again. Seeing no other option, Izuku dodged as fast as he could. That meant more power from One for All, and pain shot through his body like a dagger. "Have you been tricking me all these years? Keeping your goddamn quirk and fighting skills a secret and laughing behind my back?" Bakugo was nearly screaming. I told you about my quirk as soon as I got it, damn it." "Cut the bullshit, Deku," Bakugo yelled. "Fight me, give me everything you've got with those fancy new moves of yours. You'll never beat me." "Kaken," Izuku felt himself raise his voice as well, "I've looked up to you all my life, but I wanted to be a hero all that time as well. That never changed and never will. You think I give 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐽, Kaken?" Bakugo's eyes widened with shock. He probably always got called a JRK, but never so directly by Izuku. "Now," Izuku continued, the green light of his quirk shining brighter as he heightened One for All to 8%. "Swallow that stupid ego of yours and see for yourself. I'm ahead of you now, so what are you gonna do to keep up? Throw a tantrum on me? Or learn from your mistakes for once?" With a sudden burst in speed, Izuku instantly closed the distance between the two boys, caught Bakugo by surprise, and tackled him by his waist. Bakugo was knocked back, and Izuku quickly stepped out of the way, but when Bakugo tried to get up and fight back, he realized with a jolt that the capture tape was already wrapped firmly around his waist. There was a pause for a split second, and All Might's voice boomed from the broadcast, "Bakugo is out." Bakugo stared incredulously at the tape, then back at Izuku. Bakugo's expression was utter denial. When Bakugo finally exploded and started screaming obscenities, Izuku already leaped away. The training wasn't over yet. Each step was agonizing. Izuku limped upstairs and pressed on the communication device in his ear. "Uraraka, did you find the weapon?" A few seconds later, Uraraka's voice screamed back, "Yeah, near the middle of the 5th floor. But I'm having a hard time with Ida." Izuku could tell she was struggling. "Hold on." Moments later, Izuku arrived at the location of the fake weapon. Ida was a mere blur as he blasted around, and Uraraka, with nothing to use her quirk on, was dodging Ida's capture tape as if her life depended on it. Izuku ignored the pain in his body and darted towards Ida, sending a barrage of attacks at him. Ida, who was caught off guard, barely had enough time to realize he lost track of Uraraka before she launched herself in the air, flying weightlessly above the two boys, and landed softly on the fake weapon. A large horn blared in the training ground, signaling the end of the training. All Might announced, "The hero team is the winner. Deku won." Uraraka cheered. She seemed to enjoy calling Izuku by his nickname. Ida sighed in frustration, took off his helmet, and adjusted his glasses. He then walked over and congratulated Izuku. Thanks, Izuku smiled brightly. Ida nodded back. 𝐎𝐽𝐽𝐫 was bouncing up and down and shrieking like a 3-year-old. Then her face suddenly turned green as the side effects of her quirk took over, making her nauseous. Ida helped her downstairs. Izuku was happy, but he sighed. He knew there was one person that would not take the result of this training session lightly. The mock battle went almost completely different from last time, and Izuku tried not to think about the consequences. He also wondered for a brief moment whether it would be wise to tell Bakugo about One for All sooner, or maybe even his time travel. Come on, Midoriya, Ida called. Izuku nodded. A cloud passed in the sky and the room dimmed. The afternoon continued. Katsuki stood there, frozen. His chest was heaving, his heart and as if something was trapped in there, trying to break out. He was hyperventilating, he couldn't catch his breath. The voice of the green-haired boy reverberated in his head, like darts, like fire, exploding in his brain. All Might's voice was too loud. Like an anvil dropping on him. Voices, too many, are overlapping. Deku won. That nerd somehow predicted his every move and won. The capture tape wrapped around Katsuki's waist felt like hot iron. He tore it off with his trembling hands. Then he jumped when he felt a giant hand on his shoulder. Young Bakugo, All Might said, time to come back, we're reviewing the results. Katsuki tried to say something, to scream at Deku, to scream at All Might, but he was still frozen, strangled by an invisible wire. Whether you win or lose, All Might continued. Looking back and learning from your experiences is part of life. Finally, Katsuki walked to the building where the class was waiting. Deku looked at him for a brief moment, then turned his gaze away. All right everyone, All Might said, would anyone like to give a thought on who the MVP of this round was? Murmurs rose in the room. Almost everyone was thinking the same thing. Midoriya. All Might lifted a hand. Now does anyone know it's young Midoriya? Yes, All Might Sensei. Yaoyorozu Momo raised her hand and spoke. When looking at overall abilities, Midoriya showed the highest level of combat, strategy, and observational skills. And unlike the other team, Midoriya communicated with his teammate. Ida was obviously trying hard not to glare at Bakugo. From watching the match, Yaoyorozu continued, it appears that Bakugo acted on his own due to an obviously personal grudge. He also foolishly launched a large-scale attack indoors. Katsuki tightened his fists, his nails digging into his palms. Yaoyorozu continued to analyze the battle, but Katsuki had stopped listening a long time ago. One sentence repeated in his head. The blank anger, the denial, the shock. Katsuki felt them shatter away in his mind as they were replaced with something else, raging and blazing. After the battle training, the class changed back into their uniforms and went back to the classroom. Without a teacher around, they were finally free to bombard Izuku with questions and compliments. Midoriya, that was so cool what you did back there. No wonder you got first in the entrance exam. Guys, calm down, Ida shouted, give Midoriya some space. Izuku's classmates immediately backed away a couple of steps, but that didn't douse their excitement. Dude, Kaminari screeched, your quirk is way too cool. It's not just his quirk, 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐳 said in her naval voice. He's obviously really good at analyzing things and forming strategies as well. You guys are too nice. I mean really, Todoroki and Bakugo are way more talented than me. Izuku was definitely redder than a tomato by then. Ashidomina laughed. Look at Midoriya, trying to be all modest. Bro, if you aren't talented, I don't know who is. Kaminari said. Then everyone fell silent when a voice they haven't heard since the battle training spoke from the other side of the classroom. Maybe it isn't talent? Izuku tensed as Bakugo got up from his seat and walked slowly towards the crowd. What do you mean? Kirishima asked Bakugo. Maybe. Bakugo kept his eyes on Izuku. He something? Izuku's throat tightened. The air seemed to solidify between them. Received what? Kirishima wasn't able to finish his sentence before Bakugo interrupted him again. Don't think you can fool me, Deku. Bakugo growled, and this is the last time you'll win me, you hear? He turned and whipped a finger at Todoroki, whose face betrayed no emotion. You too, 𝐼𝐶BS30. Bakugo huffed, then shoved Kaminari out of the way and went back to his seat. What did I do? Todoroki muttered in confusion. A few days later, someone cleaned the beach. Katsuki frowned at the spotless beach and the ocean that fell and rose against it. He hadn't been around this beach park for a pretty long time, but that old hag of a mother of his just to make him run errands on a freaking weekend morning. He scoffed at the scene and wondered who was stupid enough to clean a dump. Then he saw the nerd. Deku was sitting far away on the beach, legs crossed, eyes closed. After the battle training, the mere sight of the green-haired boy made Katsuki want to punch something. What the hell is he doing? Katsuki moved closer, trying to see if Deku was up to something. After a minute or two, Deku opened his eyes and placed his hands on his forehead, his shoulders tense. Katsuki knew Deku was stressed. Suddenly, Katsuki realized with a jolt what a stressful Deku meant. Damn it, if he starts muttering, Deku started muttering. And like always, it annoyed the hell out of Katsuki. The green-haired boy was too far for Katsuki to understand what he was saying, but a few words managed to drift over and catch Katsuki's attention. Finally, Deku looked at his phone and seemed to check the time, then stood up and jogged away towards the direction of his apartment. The hell? Katsuki shook his head then walked away, the few words Deku muttered echoing in his head. And for the millionth time, Katsuki wondered what in the world that nerd was hiding. Katsuki thought. Excuse me, can you please tell us what it's like to have All Might as your teacher? The reporter lady jammed the microphone into Izuku's face as he arrived at the school gate. Sorry, but I have classes to attend to. Izuku weaved his way through the crowd of reporters and hurried inside the school to his classroom. This was it, the day the League of Villains will infiltrate UA and somehow steal a copy of the staff schedule. The people responsible for the future war will come right to their doorstep today, but as much as he hated it, Izuku did not plan to stop them. In this fight, patience was the key, and Izuku needed to utilize his advantage as much as he could. Good job on the battle training yesterday, everyone did well. Aizawa said very unenthusiastically, now homeroom stuff. Today you guys will decide on a class president. Make it fast. The classroom instantly filled with euphoria as most of the students started yelling for others to choose them as class rep, and just like last time, everything ended with a vote. What? I got 5 votes. Izuku said in disbelief as he saw the results on the board. Damn it, who voted for Deku? Bakugo yelled. I mean, he did show a lot of leadership during the battle training, Siro said quietly while some other students nodded around him. Well then, it is decided that Midoriya is class representative, and Yaoyorozu is deputy class rep, Aizawa said from his yellow sleeping bag. Izuku forced himself not to object. You doing good, Deku? Uraraka asked during lunch. Oh, I'm fine. Izuku looked away from the window and tried to relax. What were we talking about? Ida just finished sharing about his brother, Ingenium. He wants to become a hero just like him. Isn't that cool? Uraraka said as Ida nodded. Yeah, that's cool. Izuku forced away the memories of Ida's bloody arm after being stabbed by Stain, the hero killer responsible for Ingenium's retirement. Congratulations on being class representative, Ida said to Izuku. You really deserve to lead our class. Actually, I think should be the one to lead us, Izuku replied. You're probably the most responsible and serious person I know. Ida opened his mouth and was about to reply when the loud, screeching sound of the alarms started blaring. The automated voice said. Then all hell broke loose and the students stampeded into the hallways. Everybody was pushing and shoving, and Izuku was slammed against the window by the stream of students pouring out of the cafeteria. Outside, an ocean of reporters was crowding the front gate, while Aizawa and Present Mike were trying to herd them away. Izuku prayed as he felt his ribs getting squashed. Suddenly, beyond the crowd of reporters, Izuku glimpsed a flicker of white and time seemed to stop. It was the kind of white that made his heart freeze and breath choke and stomach flip. The white thing vanished as quickly as it appeared, but Izuku knew too well what it was. A pale, white hand, on the face of a crazy, monstrous, nightmarish villain. Shigaraki, everybody calm down. Ida's voice boomed through the hallway as he stood on top of the exit sign. Everything is fine. After Ida yelled for everyone to stop panicking and that the alarm was set off by the reporters, the students finally settled down and retreated to their classrooms. The police arrived a while later and drove away the reporters. On the walk back to the classroom, Kirishima came up and asked if Izuku was okay. "I saw you get squashed," Kirishima said with a small laugh, "and you looked so angry and all." "I'm fine," Izuku said, half lying, the brief glimpse of the villain replaying in his mind. "Okay, if you say so." Back in class, Izuku called for attention. "We'll choose the other student council members, but before that, I have something important to say. I believe Ida is more suited to be class representative," Izuku said. "Everyone saw how he led everyone in that crisis just now. If it weren't for him, the panic definitely could have got worse." There were murmurs of agreement. A few people still thought Izuku was a better leader, but overall the class was happy with Ida being president. "I will humbly accept the job then." Ida rose from his seat. "You can do it." Exit sign Ida. Izuku gave an encouraging smile to his friend. "You got this, Ida. We're depending on you." "Hello, Midoriya Izuku," Principal 𝐬𝐻 said, holding out a paw. Izuku returned the gesture and shook the principal's paw. "Thanks for letting me come. I am always open to having a conversation." 𝐬𝐻 sat down. "So, are the one All Might chose as his successor?" "Yes, I am." Izuku hoped he sounded better than he felt. "Please, have a seat." The principal gestured for All Might and Izuku to sit on a couch. "I believe you have something important to share with me." "Yes, Principal," Izuku said nervously. "It's gonna sound really crazy, but I know the future." "Oh." 𝐬𝐻 sat up straighter. "Less than a year from now on, there's going to be a huge war between heroes and villains. At least, that's what happened in my time. After the battle, I was sent to lure out All For One and the villains after they went into hiding. But there's this girl, Eri, with a rewind quirk. It went wrong and somehow I got sent back 2 years in time. I've relived around a year of my life by now." 𝐬𝐻 did not say a word, and the room stayed silent for a minute or two. "What do you know about the villains?" the principal finally said. "Their organization is led by All For One and this other villain, Shigaraki Tamura. He's going to attack USJ Wednesday afternoon. Will any students get hurt?" "No, but Aizawa, 13 and All Might will." Then, Izuku explained his plan to the principal. A plan he had written in his notebook months ago after going through every possible outcome he could think of. More than once had All Might heard this plan and refined it. So, it had to work. It just had to. After listening to the plan, 𝐬𝐻 thought about it for a moment, then stood up. "My boy, you have come up with a surprisingly detailed plan. I do believe it's plausible," he said. However, Izuku felt his heart sink. "As the principal of this school, I simply cannot allocate all pro-heroes to support your plan without any hard evidence that this attack will happen 100% as you say it will. It leaves the other students vulnerable." Izuku realized, a sense of hopelessness creeping up his spine. The boy opened his mouth to object, but a stern yet calming look from All Might stopped him. All Might's gaze reminded Izuku. Principal 𝐬𝐻, All Might started, but 𝐬𝐻 stopped him. "Despite what I said, I'm not saying I won't support it. I trust you with all my heart, All Might." The principal turned to Izuku. "I will allow a few teachers to go on Wednesday. I believe in Class 1A, and I think you kids are a promising group of young heroes." Izuku beamed. "Really? Thank you, Principal 𝐬𝐻. Show me I can trust you, Midoriya Izuku," 𝐬𝐻 said sternly, "because the future depends on you." Fear propelled through Izuku as he heard the sickening crunch of Shigaraki's grip on Aizawa's elbow, which decayed slowly, the teacher's flesh falling away like fragile leaves from a tree. There was the sound of 13's costume ripping away until it was ground into dust, as the dark purple mist of the villain Kurogiri warped the pro-hero's own black hole quirk against her. The imperceptible, yet deafening sound of Bill dripping to the floor as the cold, hard fingers of Nomu pierced All Might's side. Screams of his classmates. "Midoriya!" Izuku's woke up with a jolt and he felt cold perspiration run down the back of his neck. Then he saw Kaminari, who was sitting across from him on the bus, suddenly shrink in embarrassment as if feeling guilty. "Oh, sorry, Midoriya, was I talking too loud?" Obviously, Mina slapped Kaminari on the head. "Anyone would wake up if you screamed their name." "Sorry to wake you up," Tsuyu apologized, We were just talking about your quirk when Kaminari decided to scream. I did not scream. I was just talking at my usual volume. Kaminari knew it was time for him to shut up as Mina glared at him. You seem awfully tired, Midoriya, Ida said with a concerned expression. Are you feeling okay? I'm fine, just slept a little late last night, Izuku smiled. By the way, what were you guys talking about when I was sleeping? I say whatever comes to my mind, Azui replied. So, I mentioned how your quirk is similar to All Might's? Wait, what makes you think that? Izuku smiled nervously. Super strength, air blasts, you know, all that, Sato Rikido said next to Izuku. But their fighting styles are very different, Kirishima pointed out. True, plus, it looks kind of different, too, Kaminari added. Midoriya's looks a bit more flashier, right? Yeah, but when you're talking about flashy quirks, it's gotta be Bakugo and Todoroki's. Kirishima jabbed a finger towards the two boys in the back of the bus. Bakugo didn't reply. However, Izuku knew that his childhood friend was listening closely to their conversation. Bakugo's always mad, so he doesn't seem like he'll be popular, though, Azui said neutrally as if stating a fact, and Izuku instantly knew where this conversation was heading. What the hell? Bakugo shot up from his seat. You wanna fight? See? Azui didn't even look at the angry boy. Kaminari, seeing his opening, began firing derisive comments as Bakugo yelled and cursed back, and Izuku watched helplessly as the conversation gradually shifted into a Bakugo roasting battlefield. Quiet down, Aizawa finally called. We're here. The space hero 13, who was dressed in some sort of astronaut costume, gave a brief description of the facility. USJ, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, was a facility designed to imitate real-life disasters. Katsuki glanced at Deku, who was looking around nervously. Suddenly, Deku must have noticed Katsuki was frowning at him, as the nervous boy's expression instantly shifted into something more cheerful, masking his uneasiness from a moment ago. Katsuki scowled deeper. The usual, crystal-clear Deku was long gone, or at least, was gradually transforming into someone full of masks, full of lies. And this place where their rescue training was about to take place, Deku was obviously very concerned about, maybe even afraid of. When Katsuki overheard Deku muttering on the beach, USJ was something the green-haired boy mentioned a couple of times over. Hello. All Might's voice suddenly exploded from behind them. I am here. Late. All Might. Deku was the first one to turn around, and the boy let out a breath of relief. I thought you weren't going to show up, Aizawa said, annoyed. However, Katsuki didn't know if he was hallucinating. The way Aizawa and Deku looked at All Might suggested something more than simply a teacher showing up late. Something more dangerous. All right, 13 said, now that All Might is here, we can start the training. Nobody would have noticed. Even Katsuki wouldn't have if he wasn't paying attention. The way 13 talked, there was definitely something going on. He tightened his fists, his quirk slowly warming up his palms. Suddenly, the lights of the facility flickered, then blinked out. What the hell is happening? Katsuki growled as Class 1A exchanged confused glances with each other. Then he saw the dark, swirling purple mist down at the central plaza of the facility, and a person covered with pale white hands stepped out of the portal. Gather together and don't move. Aizawa roared at the class, his voice unusually loud and distinct. Everyone seemed momentarily stupefied as they all stared at the growing portal, as more and more people swarmed out like ants. Is that part of the lesson? Kirishima asked with a confused frown, his voice wavering slightly. Who are those guys? Don't move. All Might said sternly, his constant smile twitching into a frown. Those are villains. The atmosphere changed instantly as fear washed over the students and they realized the severity of what was happening. Bakugo whipped his head over to where Midoriya was originally standing, only to find that the green-haired boy was gone. 13, Eraser, evacuate and protect the students, All Might ordered, then turned towards Class 1A, his reassuring smile back on his face. Fear not, everything is fine, the hero said, I am here. In a blink of an eye, All Might dashed across the facility, leaving behind a trail of wind. The low-class criminals didn't even have time to react before they were immobilized, lying painfully on the ground. Only a few seconds later, The #1 hero had made his way to Shigaraki, the guy covered in hands. Carolina smash. Giant gusts of wind sliced towards Shigaraki, but the attack never connected with the villain as a huge monster appeared between Shigaraki and All Might, the blast of wind dissipating on impact like a breeze hitting a mountain. What? All Might muttered. Young Midoriya was right. The disgusting, bulging eyeballs of the monstrous villain rolled down and focused on the #1 hero. Then faster than lightning, its muscular arms swiped the air where All Might's head was a split second ago. All Might sent more forceful punches in the Nomu's gut and on its face, but again to no avail. Shigaraki laughed, his cold, maniac voice boasting with a sense of accomplishment and pride, "Nothing will work, All Might. Because Nomu is as strong as you are." Near the entrance of the facility, the students watched in a sort of nervous excitement. "You can do this, All Might?" Kirishima cheered. "Everyone. There are still more villains we have to evacuate." "Leave this to All Might," Ida said seriously. The students standing on the ledge watching the battles soon came to their senses and followed Ida towards the gate. "Wait." Ida looked around. "Where's Midoriya?" "Guys. Have you seen?" His voice froze when a cloud of purple mist suddenly appeared in front of the class, blocking the exit. 13 whipped her hand back, signaling the students to stop. Aizawa tightened his grip on his fabric weapon. "I won't let you pass." The deep voice of the villain resonated from the mist. 2 glowing yellow eyes shined through the darkness. "Nice to meet you, we are the League of Villains." "Nice to meet you, we are the League of Villains," Kurojirai said. "We're here to make sure that no matter what, All Might will take his last breath today." Aizawa immediately erased the mist villain's quirk, but it was too late. The moment Kurojirai appeared, another portal had opened directly behind the villain, and from it dashed out dozens of villains. "Get back." Aizawa leaped behind and used his fabric to yank back 2 students standing near the front as a barrage of attacks rained down. The mob of villains, all buzzing with excitement to attack a pro-hero, swarmed towards Aizawa. But with a single look, their quirks disappeared, and the pro-hero whipped his capture fabric at them and slammed them to the ground with frightening efficiency. However, with how large the enemy force was, it was impossible to turn around and help evacuate the students as every defeated villain was only replaced by 5 more. Plus, Aizawa's quirk couldn't last forever. Sometimes, Aizawa can't help but feel how long a blink of an eye takes. Way too long. Kurojirai vanished from Aizawa's view. Purple mist exploded around the students, and the yellow-eyed villain once again appeared in front of the class. "You're not going anywhere today." The villain's warping quirk circled the students like a tornado. Walls of mist flooded over the students, and one by one the students of Class 1A fell through the portals. "Damn it, just die and go to hell." Bakugo propelled himself towards the villain and sent a giant explosion towards his glowing yellow eyes. Kirishima followed close behind, his hardened fist grazing Kurojirai's body that was hidden in the mist. 13 lifted a finger and a strong vacuum forced some of the mist into the black hole. But with the students around, she couldn't do anything more. And without Aizawa around to stop the villain's quirk under her mask, 13 grit her teeth as she weighed the risks of releasing more of her quirk, but she knew she couldn't. With all the portals around, it was certain that her quirk would unintentionally harm someone. Also, All Might was stuck with the monster-like villain at the central plaza. There was no way she could save all the students. Then suddenly, there was the sound of a blast of air colliding with metal, and 13 was blown off balance by an explosion of gales. The purple mist around them shredded and dissipated in the wind, and the warp gates disappeared. The remaining students quickly got up and recovered. Now that the chaos was over, they realized that only Bakugo, Ida, Uraraka, Shoji, Sato, Ashido and Siro remained. 13 stood surprised. She thought the sudden attack was from All Might, but the sight in front of her made her eyes widen. The source of the air blast that would have been strong enough to blow apart a concrete wall was Midoriya Izuku. "Are you guys okay?" Midoriya took a quick moment to look around. 13 couldn't help but shiver when she saw the look in the boy's eyes. It wasn't simply maturity, determination. Experience something told 13 that this Midoriya boy had been through hell and back. "Midoriya," Ida gasped. "Where did you—" "It's not over yet." Bakugo suddenly interrupted, and Midoriya whipped his body around to throw a punch at Kurogiri, who had reacted at the last second and dodged most of the previous attack. This time, the villain was ready, and a warp gate appeared right in Midoriya's path. The boy aimed a finger at the ground and flicked, the force propelling him up and over the open portal. But the villain was already gone, and 13 realized with a jolt that Kurogiri had teleported behind the boy. "Go for the neck," Midoriya suddenly yelled. Immediately, a hand grabbed onto the neck of the villain, gripping the metal collar. It was Bakugo. An explosion fired off from his palms, and the villain was blown away, hitting the ground violently. Then, without giving the villain a second to recover, Midoriya reappeared above Kurogiri and flicked his finger, creating a blast of air that collided hard with the villain's weak spot. The green-haired boy landed deftly next to Bakugo, and the purple mist around them condensed around the villain and grew still. Kurogiri was finally unconscious. "Sorry for disappearing, guys," Midoriya said. "I had to wait for the right moment." "Were you preparing to attack the villain from the beginning?" Uraraka breathed, amazed. "It isn't over," Midoriya said solemnly, tightening his fist, "but we have hope." Then suddenly a flare shot up from the central plaza, casting a bright red glow across the facility. 13 smiled underneath her helmet. It was the signal. Aizawa Shoto weaved through the endless crowd of villains, never seeming to get close to the students, who were trapped in the tornado of purple mist. But he wasn't going to let a bunch of annoying low-class villains stop him. His students needed him. Frustration and determination fueled his movements, and one after another the villains fell to the ground. When Aizawa finished off the last villain and rushed towards his students, a gust of wind suddenly blasted from where Kurogiri is, and the purple mist dissipated. If the teleporting villain was defeated, Aizawa looked towards the direction of the central plaza, and sure enough, the signal flare soared to the sky. A few minutes earlier, Shigaraki scraped his fingernails down his neck. The ground of the central plaza was splintered from the battle between All Might and Nomu. "And even though your power is declining just as I expected," Shigaraki growled, "why won't you die?" "Because," All Might said through gritted teeth, "I will not let you hurt my students." The pro-hero was already using 100% of his power, but the Nomu's shock absorption kept the monster unharmed. This couldn't continue. Even though young Midoriya had specifically warned All Might not to use up his power this morning, the hero couldn't stand by and watch people get hurt. So instead, All Might had organized and aided other heroes to defeat those villains earlier that morning so he would have the energy remaining to fight the League of Villains this afternoon. Despite saving his power, the Nomu was stronger than he ever expected. He had to end this fight soon. If he used too much of his power today, he would be too weak to face All For One in the not-so-distant future. That was part of the reason why All Might was grateful that Midoriya had traveled back in time. Young Midoriya had shown All Might all the people he could reach, all those he can save. And he will try to save them, whatever it takes. All Might reached inside One For All. He reached for the strength held by all those before him. As the symbol of peace, the pillar of hope, All Might gathered more and more power despite the protests of his body. "As a hero, I will never back down from you villains." Then all the surroundings were washed in red as the signal flare shot towards the roof of the facility. As everyone in Class 1A turned to look at the flare, they realized the devastation of All Might's fight with the Nomu. Izuku opened his palm that held the remote control for the flare. Now that his task was complete, he tucked it in his pocket, unnoticed by anyone else. "That monster villain, even All Might can't defeat him yet?" Zero stammered. "Not yet," Midoriya said, "but he will soon. He's the #1 hero." Aizawa rushed over to the remaining students standing on the other side of the pathway, which was near the staircase leading down to the center of the facility. Then he got a clearer view of All Might down at the plaza, and from the look on the #1 hero's face, Aizawa knew that fight would be coming to an end. All Might's fist connected with Nomu, the force of the collision sending hurricanes of wind tearing through the facility. Shigaraki was blown back, tumbling across the ground. "What are you facing?" Nomu's shock absorption head-on. The blue-haired villain struggled to stand up straight in the fierce wind. Since it's simply shock absorption, not nullification, there would be a limit. All Might quickened and strengthened his punches, which became so fast even he himself couldn't quite see the outline of his fists. His muscles screamed in pain, blood seeped through his teeth. The hero roared as his strength went way beyond 100% of his power. Faster. Stronger. The Nomu struggled under the barrage of attacks, and was finally blown away backwards as All Might sent a devastating punch, which splintered the concrete ground and ripped apart the nearby trees. You might have heard this saying before. The hero leaped into the air and appeared behind the Nomu, but I'll teach you what it really means. All Might pulled back his arm as the Nomu flew nearer, go beyond, his fist connected with the monster's gut. Plus ultra. The red flare shot towards the ceiling of the dome-shaped facility. What the hell is happening, my Nomu? Shigaraki Tamura stammered, taking a few steps back. The Nomu was gone. Blasted away through the ceiling, leaving a large, gaping hole. It was comical in a way. Anger and fear flooded through Shigaraki, and a sudden burst of rage made him yell and dash towards All Might, who was standing heroically near the center of the plaza, dust and smoke billowing around the hero's feet. The sight disgusted Shigaraki, magnifying his rage and resentment. Today is the day you die. Then suddenly a piercing pain exploded from his forearms and legs, one after the other, and he buckled back, falling to the ground. He cried out in pain and frustration, then his body trembled with tangible fear as he realized he was shot. He turned quickly to the source of the gunshot sound, and his stomach lurched when he saw them. They were here. Standing on a tall ledge from the mountainous terrain, a pro-hero with a cowboy hat, a mask, and a red cape held up a gun, pointing directly at Shigaraki. The villain breathed raggedly and slowly inched away, still on the ground. "Kurogyari," Shigaraki called, but there was no reply. No purple mist instantly appearing next to him whenever he demanded. "Kurogyari." He yelled again, desperation and denial seeping through his voice. "Don't bother," someone else called out. Shigaraki realized with a jolt it was another pro-hero on the other side of the stadium, walking out from the trees. This hero had long blonde hair and a really annoying voice. "Your teleporting friend is out of service?" The loud blonde hero screeched. "Damn it. It was a trap all along," Shigaraki said through gritted teeth, the pain from the bullet wounds tearing through his body. "That or you lied." His mind barely had enough time to register that fact when he felt his entire body restrained as white strands of fabric snapped tight around him. The villain struggled against the restraints to no avail. His arms were stuck behind his back and his hands couldn't reach the fabric wrapped around him. "It would be advantageous for you to stop struggling," the deep voice that belonged to Eraserhead said behind Shigaraki. "I've erased your quirk anyway." "You filthy heroes," the villain spat. "I will not lose." To his movements became sluggish and his eyelids grew heavy, then he felt himself sink into darkness. "Wait, they were here, in the facility, the entire time?" Ida said, his voice full of confusion and disbelief. The group of 1A students standing on top of the staircase witnessed how pro-heroes popped out of nowhere, and they were very surprised. "There's no other explanation," Bakugo muttered. "It was an ambush all along." "So they knew the villains would come here?" Uraraka asked as she watched a swarm of ectoplasm's clones race towards different sectors of the facility. On the central plaza, Shigaraki was unconscious, knocked out by Midnight's quirk. Cementos had constructed a high wall, blocking the students' view of All Might. Izuku knew that his mentor was at his limit now. But how would they know? Ida wondered out loud, and if they did, why risk the safety of the class? The sound of 13 sighing attracted the attention of the class. "Trust me, we didn't want to endanger all of you. But we needed to make sure the villains did not doubt anything," she said, then motioned at the unconscious body of Purple Mist, "especially since they have a villain who can teleport." "I suppose that's reasonable," Ida replied. "How did you know in the first place, though?" Bakugo wasn't letting this matter go. "Do you remember that security outbreak a while back? It was caused by them. We later noticed that a copy of a teacher schedule was missing," 13 explained. "We deduced that the arrival of All Might sparked hostility from villains, and so we set up precautions, hoping to protect the students while also to capture all the villains in one try." Bakugo just listened quietly, and the entire class seemed to be convinced. However, Izuku couldn't help the burning feeling of guilt. Those stories were all lies, fabricated by the principal and All Might to hide the truth of Izuku's time travel. None of the teachers knew Izuku's side of the story, and they were only told that the police received an anonymous tip saying that the League of Villains was planning to attack USJ on this day. Izuku felt suffocated, all the lies dripping into his life until they flooded him completely. It felt like poison. 𝐎𝐩𝐢𝐳 swam as fast as she could. She was somewhere in the shipwreck zone, dragging Mineta towards the shore. Behind her chased numerous other villains, the one that looked like a shark closing the distance at a frightening speed. 𝐒𝐈 forced herself to stay calm. Mineta was trying his best to hold his breath, but he wouldn't be able to do so for long. The shark villain was getting closer and closer, and 𝐒𝐈 pushed herself to her limit. She thought about the mock battle training. How did the winning sides win? What did they do? Then she thought about Midoriya, his fight against Bakugo. There was one time where Midoriya had leaped above and over Bakugo to dodge an attack, while simultaneously blasting the blonde boy down with his quirk. An idea formed in her head. Sorry, Mineta. Before Mineta could register what was happening, 𝐒𝐈 threw Mineta straight out of the water in the air with her tongue. 𝐴sui! Mineta screeched as he flew vertically up in the air. In the water, the shark villain laughed cynically, saving your friend first. How moving! The shark villain opened his mouth, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. 𝐒𝐈 stopped swimming and stayed in place as the villain closed the distance in merely a few seconds. Then just as the villain snapped his mouth shut, 𝐒𝐈 dodged out of the way upwards. The villain's momentum kept him charging forward in the water, so he couldn't stop in time to turn around and attack 𝐒𝐈 again. Taking this opening, 𝐒𝐈 stepped ℎRD on the villain's back and kicked herself up out of the water and in the air. She used the villain's own momentum to help her burst out of the water. Mineta was already falling, his screeching getting more and more desperate. His fall was stopped abruptly as 𝐒𝐈's tongue wrapped around him, and he lurched in the air until finally he landed in shallow waters. Mineta opened his eyes. What in the world just happened? 𝐒𝐈 landed right next to him only seconds later, the water splashing into Mineta's eyes, so he had to close them again. Come on, let's go, they're catching up again. 𝐒𝐈 hurried out of the water towards the shore. Mineta followed close behind. Then suddenly they saw a familiar figure and Mineta nearly burst into tears. Ectoplasm halted in front of them. Is anyone hurt? The pro-hero said, his presence reassuring. 𝐒𝐈 shook her head. It's just me and Mineta in this zone. Where are the others? All scattered about. But everything is under control now. Let's go. Gunshots, most likely from sniper, echoed in the facility, and screams of pain sounded from the waters behind them. Those villains, however scary they seemed to 𝐒𝐈 and Mineta, were mere insects compared to the professional heroes. Geez, 𝐎𝐸𝐲, how did you get us out of there though? Mineta asked as they started to head back towards the entrance. You should pay more attention in training, 𝐒𝐈 ribeted, especially during Midoriya's rounds. Not long after, the remaining lower-class villains were all defeated by the pro-heroes, and the sounds of police sirens had gathered at the gate of USJ. Kirishima had arrived first, followed by Todoroki, 𝐎𝐸𝐲 and Mineta, then the rest of Class 1A. Gradually reunited with the main group waiting on the top of the stairs. Friends checked with each other to make sure they were okay, and stories were exchanged from the different sectors of the facility. However, despite all the sighs of relief and proud stories of fights against villains, nothing was the same anymore, and everyone felt it. A palpable tension lingered above the class no matter how much they tried to ignore it. They were shown the real world and the real dangers to come, and there was a sense of panic, almost, as no one knew how much worse these disasters can get. But there was also something new. A feeling of seriousness and newfound determination that this world needed protection. Everyone was thinking about the attack, but Izuku's mind was glued to something else. Shigaraki and Kurohige apprehended, all for one out there somewhere in the unknown. Nothing will be the same again. Glad for you to join me today. Principal Nizu squeaked as Izuku and All Might sat down on the sofa in the principal's office. I would like to start with the elephant in the room. Nizu sipped from his tea. It happened? Yes, sir, it did, Izuku replied. A few updates. If you haven't heard it from your homeroom teacher already, all of the villains were captured. Apart from Shigaraki Tamura and Kurohige, who are currently detained in Tartarus. The lower-class villains are all detained in various high-security jails in the city. How are your classmates? They're doing fine. Even though this was a pretty frightening experience, all of us have recovered, and we're all starting to get ready for the sports festival. People like Kirishima are really hyped up for it. Nizu hesitated for a split second and his expression became carefully composed again. Midoriya, with your abundant experience in the interaction with villains, have you ever suspected information leaks? What? Izuku frowned at Nizu's tone. You mean traitors? To put it bluntly, yes. No, I haven't really. Very well then. Nizu hopped off his chair and walked around the table towards Izuku and All Might. If you need my help, my office is always open. Both of you should go and rest. I understand that All Might had quite the fight. It's my duty. All Might bowed slightly, then both of them left the office. Izuku walked with his mentor silently in the empty hallway. It was late in the afternoon, with the last rays of sunset peeking through the glass walls. They went back to All Might's private office, where Izuku had temporarily stored his backpack. You seem a bit down, young Midoriya. All Might broke the silence. I just feel like I'm losing my advantage of knowing the future, Izuku said as he retrieved his backpack. What if things go worse starting from now? It was the right decision, All Might asserted, and plus, no matter if you know what's gonna happen or not, you must always be ahead of the villains. I'm sure in your original time you were doing the exact same thing, even if you were facing an unknown path. Izuku thought about it, then nodded. Then someone knocked on the office door. Midoriya. All Might opened the door and Aizawa stepped in. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku greeted his teacher. I saw you come in here. I need to ask you about something, and I'm pretty sure All Might is aware of this, Aizawa said in a serious tone. You were the anonymous tipper, weren't you? Izuku flinched. From the way you acted today, you knew what was going to happen, Aizawa continued, his face expressionless, and the way you fight you're not like Bakugo, who knows how to react by nature. Nor are you like Todoroki, who was trained under Endeavor. You've obviously received some sort of training before, but none of your records say so. All Might was listening intently, obviously surprised by Aizawa's observations as well. Izuku didn't like where this was heading. My point is, Aizawa said, I know it when my student is hiding something. What else do you know? It was 2 days after the attack. The day before, classes were cancelled for teachers to confront the media, talk with the police, and for students to take a breath after the horrible event that happened. Izuku opened the door of his homeroom and conversations surrounding the attack flooded his senses. Good morning, Deku. Uraraka waved. We were just talking about 𝐎𝐽. Doesn't seem like there's anything else to talk about, Kaminari said. What do you think, Midoriya? Siro asked. About all this, I mean. Izuku weighed his response carefully. I'd say it was terrifying, but the pros handled it, right? It seemed like a successful ambush. I agree, Brodes Kaminari exclaimed, and All Might's fight. That was so darn cool, man. Everybody take a seat, Ida ordered from the front of the classroom, even though everyone was seated already. Then the door slid open, revealing Aizawa. The teacher's gaze met with Izuku's for a moment, but from that simple look, Izuku could feel that so much between them had changed. Aizawa Shoto walked into the classroom and his eyes instantly landed on Midoriya Izuku. 2 days ago, Shota had questioned Midoriya about his knowledge of the USJ attack time travel. That's what he said. A war against villains, Shota had pondered Midoriya's words, then shifted his glance at All Might. And you knew about this? It's hard to digest, but I believe in young Midoriya, All Might said with conviction. Shota looked back at the nervous boy. This girl you speak of, where is she now? Midoriya looked down, his expression remorseful. This bothers me every waking moment since I came back, but right now, she's trapped. Abused. She's hurting. But I know it isn't time for me to go save her yet. The boy's voice trembled, and Shota could feel that he was pouring out feelings trapped deep down inside. Of course, Shota must admit that he still had his doubts about Midoriya, especially after a villain attack that the boy obviously knew of beforehand. However, if this is true, Shota said, stop thinking whatever you're thinking. Midoriya looked up with confusion. To live a regretful life believing you're the only person in the world that can solve everything is not the mindset I teach my students. You chose to come back to UA, you should realize that you have everyone else here to help you now. Midoriya seemed surprised for a moment, but then nodded. Thank you, sensei. And right now, despite the absurdity of the boy's story, Shota started understanding how All Might felt. This boy might be worth believing. Woo! Kirishima cheered. Sports festival, here we come? One step closer to being pro. Kaminari exclaimed. Izuku shared their excitement. The sports festival was actually something he really looked forward to. What's going on? Uraraka's voice drifted from the classroom door as she opened it, and the sound of chattering attracted the class's attention to the door. The entire hallway was filled with a crowd of students, blocking the classroom door. We can't get out, what are they here for? Mineta said. Scoping out the competition, duh. Bakugo walked straight to the door. Since we survived a villain attack. Bakugo halted right in front of the crowd. Move aside, cannon fodder. Both students inside and outside the classroom gasped at Bakugo's audacity. Here he goes again, Izuku muttered. Then, there was a small, humorless laugh, and a tall figure stepped out from the sea of students toward Bakugo. Izuku couldn't help but smile at the familiar figure he hasn't seen since he came back. Shinso. Are all the hero students like this? Shinso raised an eyebrow, gaze unfaltering despite Bakugo's glare. Gotta say, I'm kinda disillusioned. Shinso glanced at Izuku. And you got first for the entrance exam, right? Consider this the time that you Hero Corps students get knocked off your pedestals. A declaration of war, Bakugo said calmly, then suddenly started shoving his way out into the hallway, ignoring the shouts of surprise from other students. Dude, you just gave us a whole mob of haters. Kaminari screeched. Oh really? Bakugo looked back. Well, I don't give a demon. He met Izuku's gaze for a split second. I'm heading for the top, anyway. 2 weeks later. The prep room buzzed with excitement and nervousness. The students of Class 1A just finished warming up, and they sat around in the room talking about what was about to come. Izuku took a deep breath. For the first time, Izuku tried to forget about his mission. He'd have to admit it might be a bit selfish, but today was the day that he would show the world he was here. The sound of someone calling his name attracted his attention, and Izuku found himself face to face with Todoroki. Todoroki. What is it? All Might's got his eyes on you, hasn't he? Todoroki said, I won't pry. But although you are capable, I will beat you today. Izuku nodded. You're very strong, Todoroki. But keep this in mind, everyone's aiming for the top. So I'm going for it with everything I got. The question is, will you? Izuku walked past Todoroki, patting his left shoulder. Todoroki visibly tensed, but his expression was nonetheless composed. Right? Todoroki muttered almost inaudibly, everyone's aiming for the top. Especially that old man. Welcome to the UA Sports Festival. Present Mick's voice boomed from every possible corner of the huge stadium. First up, we know him, we've heard him. The rising stars who brushed OFF a villain attack with steely willpower, Hero Course, Class 1A. Applause thundered in the stadium as the class walked out toward the center. Following Class 1A were the other classes of the Hero Course, the General Studies Course, Support Course, and the Business Course. The students gathered in the center, where Midnight was standing on the referee podium. Now, for the athlete's oath, Midnight announced after everyone gathered around and the applause faded out. Your student representative is from Class 1A, Midoriya Izuku? Instantly, Izuku whipped his head toward Bakugo to observe his reaction. Bakugo scowled but didn't punch Izuku or anything, which made Izuku a slight bit relieved. Must be because you got first in the entrance exam, Siro commented. The entrance exam, you mean? A girl from General Studies added sardonically from the side. Izuku walked stiffly up to the podium and mechanically delivered the athlete's oath, which bored a lot of people, but at least it wasn't a declaration of war or something. Now, without delay, Midnight announced, let's get to our first event, the obstacle course race. The first-year students readied themselves as a large mechanical gateway clicked open, revealing the obstacle course. The gateway was more of a hallway, with a tall ceiling and narrow passageway. In order to pass through, there would be a big squeeze. So Izuku's not gonna do that. Racers, to your positions start. The students dashed in the gate, but Izuku waited. Summoning one for all, Izuku strengthened his body and lowered to a crouch. Then, like a spring, Izuku burst into the air, into the gateway. However, instead of running into the crowd of students, who were pushing and shoving each other to get through, Izuku leaped toward the higher part of the gateway wall. Landing on the side, Izuku stepped hard and propelled himself towards the opposite wall of the hallway. He used his quirk to leap from side to side in the air above everyone else until he made it through without even touching the ground. Emerging from the starting gate, Izuku was now well ahead of everyone else. Woo! Class 1A Midoriya Izuku is in the lead. Present Mike announced overenthusiastically. Todoroki was second, freezing everyone else behind him, although the rest of Class 1A was quick to realize Todoroki's trick and got away from the ground. "I ain't letting any of you go in front of me." Bakugo's voice boomed from behind. Izuku landed on the ground and halted. A shadow loomed upon him as the first obstacle entered his view. Giant robots made their way towards the students, their mechanical hums reverberating in the air. Izuku leaped in the air again. Using the robot parts as footholds, Izuku dodged the attacks of the machines and quickly made his way above and over the moving heaps of metal. The sound of explosions and angry screams of Deku and half blasted from behind, and Izuku knew that his childhood friend was catching up. Izuku hurried away from the robot obstacle course, and Todoroki and Bakugo were still behind him, but not far now. Izuku passed the second obstacle easily enough. It was a deep cliff with wires hanging around, but with his speed and a few large leaps, Izuku was able to keep his lead. Then he arrived at the minefield obstacle. This one was a lot trickier since his quirk couldn't allow him to reach the other side without landing a few times on the ground. He would need to choose where to land carefully. Deku. Bakugo was catching up, and the other pair of footsteps most likely belonged to Todoroki. Izuku's body was getting slightly sore due to using his quirk for longer than his body was used to, but he was too close to victory now to bother. He kept his ground right in front of this final obstacle, his eyes darting across the minefield, searching for the quickest route. Todoroki raced past Izuku, followed by Bakugo. A turn of events. Todoroki is now in the lead, followed by Bakugo. Why is Midoriya just standing there? Izuku raised one for all to the height of his body's limit, then burst forward, straight past Todoroki and Bakugo. He bounded across the minefield, taking no time to reassess where the mines were on the ground nor think of the two boys behind him. He followed the route in his mind, the fastest possible route. He's going so fast. Without triggering a single mine. Present Mike screeched, unlike Todoroki and Bakugo back here, they still have to keep their eyes on the ground. Damn it. Bakugo yelled, then the sound of his explosion quirk manifested again, this time louder than usual. Following that was the sound of Todoroki's ice forming. Izuku tried to focus on where he was going, but suddenly the moment his right foot touched the ground he was yanked back with a sudden force, and he landed on his elbows. Izuku screeched. A mine was literally an inch away from his face. He was lucky that where his elbows and feet contacted the ground there were no other mines. He whipped his head back to look at his right foot, and sure enough, it was frozen. Todoroki somehow froze Izuku's foot the moment it touched the ground. Bakugo flew past over his head, and Todoroki sprinted past on a path of ice, close behind. Without a moment of hesitation, Izuku shoved himself up, yanked his foot, and broke the ice, then crawled up carefully without exploding himself. Bakugo and Todoroki were closing in on the finish line. Part of Izuku wanted to chase after them immediately, but he stopped himself and took a deep breath. He hadn't used the full version of this move since he came back, and he didn't know if his body was ready or not, but it was the only move that could help him win this race. Izuku concentrated hard. Then, drawing out 20% of his power instantly, he flicked his finger at the ground. Delaware Smash Air Force? Without specialized gear to aid this move, it wasn't as precise, but it did the trick. The force of the blast propelled him forward in the air, while also erupting many of the mines below, their explosive forces further pushing Izuku toward the two leading boys. His fingers burned in pain, but he gritted his teeth and fired again, this time completely catching up to Bakugo and Todoroki. Stay back, Izuku landed on the ground right beside the other two, the minefield already far behind. I told you, I'm giving it all I got. Izuku yelled, his eyes glued forward at the finish line, and with his quirk strengthening his entire body again, he dashed forward. Present Mick's voice blasted from the speakers again. Boy, that was so exciting. 𝐔𝐬𝐴cer, what do you teach your kids? Without waiting for an answer, Present Mike shifted the topic back to the race. The one who made it back first to the stadium and won the first event of the first-year sports festival is Izuku burst out the gate. None other than Midoriya Izuku. Bakugo gripped his forearm in a helpless attempt to quell the stinging pain of overusing his quirk. Damn it, he grumbled. Todoroki glanced at the huffing, puffing blonde boy, then back at Midoriya, who was staring at the rankings displayed on the digital screens around the arena, chest heaving, hands on knees. Midoriya first. Bakugo second. Todoroki third. Todoroki's expression twitched into a frown. He found it quite hard to believe his ranking. He had to admit that Midoriya showed more wisdom during the obstacle race. However, Bakugo, who was purely fueled by anger, shouldn't have surpassed him. And this ranking was certainly a nuisance. Todoroki's gaze shifted towards the north side of the audience, landing on the fire hero, Endeavor. The boy always found his father's costume disgustingly ostentatious. The hero was staring at him, his distant gaze telling Todoroki everything he needed to know. Disappointment. Todoroki turned away from Endeavor's burning gaze and looked back at the gate. The other competitors were trickling past the finish line back in the stadium, all gasping for their breath. As the final few students returned, Midnight called for everyone's attention and congratulated the top 42 students who would proceed to the next round. Now, on to the second event, she announced as the students looked anxiously at the display. Next up is the cavalry battle. Midnight then explained the rules. Teams of 2 to 4, horse and rider formation, getting opponents' headbands, the higher you rank, the higher your points, and our first place participant is worth 10 million points. The numbers struck Bakugo like lightning, and he whipped his head toward Midoriya along with everyone else on the field. The green-haired boy visibly tensed, his expression hardening as if he suddenly possessed Kirishima's quirk. Nonetheless, Midoriya seemed much less surprised at his points than the rest of the students and much calmer than Bakugo expected him to be. The tiny stream of confidence seeping through Midoriya's expression was as irritating as nails on chalk. The blonde boy looked away with a grunt and focused on Midnight again, who announced that the students had 15 minutes to form their teams. Only a few minutes later, Bakugo was surrounded by people. Almost all of them were from his class. At least he thought they were from his class. He basically paid attention to nobody, and they were all yapping for Bakugo to choose them. On the other side of the field, Todoroki had already gathered his deliberately chosen team, with Yaoyorozu, Kaminari, and Ida. Uraraka weaved through the crowds, then spotted the familiar head of messy green hair. Almost as if he were expecting her, Midoriya turned around, then greeted her with a smile. "Do you want to team up with me?" Uraraka asked, excited to team up with a friend. Midoriya sighed in relief. "Definitely. Since everyone's aiming for my points, nobody wants to team up with me. To be honest, that feels wrong," she shrugged, which made him tilt his head in confusion. "I actually think teaming up with you is an automatic win, seeing your achievements so far." His eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratefulness. "Even I'm not confident in that," he laughed, then looked down, "and I know that so many more people are gonna target me after that win. Being a hero is competitive, to say the least. It also attracts way too many dangers." His voice died down at the end, and she had to strain to hear. His tone suggested something much bigger than the sports festival. Uraraka couldn't help but feel curious toward Midoriya's tone sometimes. He always seemed to carry some mental baggage that nobody else could decipher. Anyway, Midoriya changed the subject, then explained his strategy for the next event. "You have a very specific plan, Deku," Uraraka commented. "Do you have a team in mind?" "Yup. Can you go get Tokoyami for me? I'm going to go deal with the, more energetic one." A split second later, as if summoned by his words, a pink-haired girl carrying a buttload of support items sprung into existence beside Midoriya. Mr. First Place. So glad to see you. Team up with me. She moved her face toward Midoriya's and he had to dodge back to prevent her from getting way too close. 𝐎𝐼𝐺 discovered that this new girl never seemed to close her mouth hole. Unlike Midoriya, who would mutter with words like an unending stream, this girl rapid-fired like a machine gun. The pink-haired girl introduced herself as 𝐎𝐵, and the rest 𝐎𝐼𝐺 didn't really comprehend, so she just left and went to search for Tokoyami, the bird-headed boy who was eerily silent all the time. Surprisingly, Tokoyami agreed to join after 𝐎𝐼𝐺 briefly explained Midoriya's plan. Across the field, the last of the 12 teams were formed and the 15 minutes came to an end. The audience was already buzzing with excitement and the cheers have gradually started to increase in volume. Present Mick's voice filled the stadium once more. Ready or not, the countdown to this brutal battle royal starts now. Midoriya's team felt the green-haired boy take a deep breath. Ready, guys? He tightened his headband, printed with a bold 10,325. Ready as I'll ever be. Tokoyami released his quirk, the dark shadow hovering in front of the team. 3. Bakugo stretched out his forearms, somewhat recovered from the earlier pain. Keep your eyes on the target, he growled to his team, with pink girl, shitty hair, and weird elbows. Toots Todoroki glared coldly at the green-haired boy in the distance. 1 start. Start. Instantly, 2 of the closest teams, one from Class A and another from Class B, burst toward Midoriya's team. Midoriya squinted his eyes as he studied the 2 teams coming toward them. Wait, what was that guy's quirk again? Oh gosh, brace yourselves. Midoriya warned, then pressed the button of the remote in his hand. The jetpack on his back hummed into life, then they launched into the air. 𝐎𝐼𝐺 was confused as to why he activated the pack so early, but her confusion dissipated the moment after as the ground below them softened into mush. Class B has someone who can mushify things. 𝐎𝐼𝐺 blurted, unable to find the right word. Apparently, yeah. Midoriya replied. Attacks from below shot towards them, but Tokoyami's shadow easily reflected them. With the help of 𝐎𝐼𝐺's quirk making them weightless, Hatsume's support items providing move, and Tokoyami's seamless defense, Midoriya's team was able to avoid the barrage of attacks raining upon them. DKU. Here he comes, Midoriya cautioned. 𝐎𝐼𝐺 shrieked as the blonde boy blasted toward them like a missile. Dark shadow shielded the explosions, and the team could see Tokoyami's quirk slightly weakening from the bright nature of Bakugo's attack. Bakugo grunted in frustration, gravity dragging him toward the ground as Midoriya's group quickly retreated. But he wasn't going to give up like that. With a stronger explosion of his quirk, he blasted toward them once again. It was at this moment when Todoroki's team arrived near Midoriya as well. Kaminari, Todoroki ordered. Kaminari smirked, and a blanket created by Yaoyorozu draped over the rest of the group. Tokoyami, Midoriya yelled, a tinge of worry in his voice. Block Kaminari. What about Bakugo? Give me a boost. The bright green light of his quirk appeared around Midoriya and his teammates instantly realized what he was about to do. With a push from his teammates, Midoriya leaped up in the air, weightless. Died. Bakugo pulled his arms back, his quirk crackling at his palms. Turning himself in the air like a spinning top, Midoriya sent a powerful roundhouse kick swiping in the air in front of him. Just as Bakugo thought Midoriya missed, the blonde boy realized the disadvantage of his position. The wind force from Midoriya's kick sent Bakugo flying backward, past his teammates. Bakugo! Kirishima gasped, and Siro shot his tape at the falling boy. However, Bakugo was falling way too fast for Siro to catch him. Damn it, Bakugo was tumbling in the air toward the ground. Not just physically, he felt the distance between him and Midoriya widen. It was unbearable. Nonetheless, a dangerous, icy sense of calmness washed over him, and he slowed his fall with a well-aimed explosion despite his body spinning backward in the air. Siro let go a breath of relief and scooped Bakugo right back to their horse formation just in time. Bro, you okay? Kirishima asked, turning his head back. Then his eyes widened. Bakugo felt a tug on his head and reacted instantly. His arm whipped back, slamming an explosion in the general area where he sensed the team was and hit them right on. The Class B student was forced to let go of the headband, and their team stumbled back, trying to gain balance, as Bakugo's headband dangled dangerously on his shoulder. The 1A student readjusted the headband as he stared daggers at the Class B team that dared ambush them. "Geez, I might have underestimated you a tad," the rider from the Class B team smirked. He had slick blonde hair and dull blue eyes. His expression was of unmasked contempt. "But still, you 1A students are simple." Bakugo twitched in annoyance. "You especially," the Class B student continued, chasing after that first-place guy over and over again like a donkey after a carrot, "but failing miserably all the same. Aren't you tired? Don't you feel even a tiny bit of pity for yourself?" The student tossed his head back in laughter. "Bakugo, don't fall for it," Kirishima warned, but Ishido and Siro knew it would be to no avail. "Slight change of plans, shitty hair," Bakugo said with a grin. "We'll make this quick." Meanwhile, Midoriya had landed back with his group and Tokoyami had blocked off most of Kaminari's electric attack. The ground was frozen, but with Uraraka's anti-gravity quirk, Todoroki's attack had been easy to avoid. Todoroki had created a wall of ice surrounding the two teams, so no other team would be in the way for him to take the million-point headband. And he wasn't planning to fail. Todoroki, Ida shifted his weight, slightly surprising Todoroki. "What happens next will be up to you guys. Be sure to grab it." "What are you going to?" Todoroki's question was interrupted as air slammed into his face and the distance between him and Midoriya was closed in a blink of an eye. Reacting just in time, Todoroki shot his arm out toward the white headband resting on Midoriya's head. Ida exhaled with a triumphant expression, his engines whirring to a stop as a trail of smoke behind him billowed in the air. He whipped his head back to Todoroki, but the sight made his throat tighten. "Todoroki, I missed." Todoroki frowned, his bottom lip twitching. Ida turned away from his teammate and back at his opponent. "No way." Ida's eyes widened in disbelief. Midoriya was in the air, weightless with Uraraka's quirk. The headband was still on Midoriya's head. Did Midoriya dodge that? Kaminari squinted. "Ida, did Midoriya know about your secret move?" Todoroki asked. "No, I never told anyone apart from you three," Ida asserted. Meanwhile, with the help of Tokoyami's dark shadow, Midoriya landed back on the horse formation. "Boy, that was scary," Uraraka said, her voice still quivering from the earlier jump scare. "You missed your first place. Maybe try giving a warning before blasting yourself in the air. My babies might not be able to handle a sudden force like that." Hatsum complained. "Sorry guys, Ida's move was way too fast." "I barely reacted," Midoriya replied. "That was indeed surprisingly fast," Tokoyami muttered. The team adjusted themselves, facing Todoroki's team once again. Todoroki's normally deadpan expression was now unusually irritated. He even looked a bit angry. "Go," Todoroki ordered, and the team rushed forward. Without Ida's engine now, they were much slower, but the way Todoroki looked at them told Midoriya's team that they wouldn't be getting out of this easily. A mountain of ice burst from the ground and Midoriya's team stumbled out of the way. But the ice kept coming, Todoroki's attacks getting larger and faster. Only moments later, the small arena the two teams were on was already a forest of ice and boulders. The image of Todoroki's team reflected around in the walls of ice, a blur of color. "They're trying to block our view," Midoriya said, realization evident in his voice. "Be careful." Sure enough, they barely had time to react as Todoroki's team emerged from behind an ice wall and Todoroki's hand reached toward Midoriya's headband. "Steady, guys," Midoriya said to his team after he dodged. "We just need a little bit more time." Todoroki glanced at the countdown and grunted. His right arm was already covered in frost, unable to summon ice large enough to hinder the opposing team anymore. His attacks were useless now. Even worse, he was all too aware of his father's gaze boring holes in his back. But he was more frustrated at himself. He worked hard. What was it that Midoriya had that he didn't? Todoroki shuddered in realization as he remembered what the green-hair boy said to him. Todoroki thought, "Why does everyone keep pressuring him like that? He will never use his fire quirk." But despite his thoughts, something else burned in his mind. They didn't care. Nobody cared. To everyone else, he was just someone being taken advantage of by the other team, by Midoriya. To everyone else, he was only himself, but a coward. Todoroki told himself, but his thoughts were drowned away. A flame trickled from Todoroki's left finger and grew into a towering flame. The wall of fire crashed down like a tsunami. Tokoyami's dark shadow rushed in front to block the flames but instantly shrunk back as the bright light almost erased it entirely. Tokoyami stumbled back as the fire singed the collar of his shirt. They could still dodge this, Izuku thought through gritted teeth as the team retreated backward. Stop, stop, stop. Uraraka's voice rang suddenly, her voice panicked. Her foot was caught on something. The teams lurched backward, but 𝐻𝐪𝐼's random jetpack that she put on at an unknown time automatically blasted a stream of air, saving the team from falling down like dominoes. The split second Izuku recovered, Todoroki snatched away his headband. Before Izuku even blinked, his arm shot out instinctively and yanked on whatever fabric he could reach. Everything happened almost too quickly. Todoroki's team had retreated, the fire died away, Uraraka realized her shoe was stuck on one of Mineta's stray purple ball, Tokoyami took a deep breath as dark shadow shivered by his side, 𝐻𝐻𝐼 started rambling about the genius design of her baby jetpack, and Izuku heard the blaring sound of Mick's voice, "Time's up." It was then that everything seemed to finally register for Izuku. Todoroki used his fire. The round was over. Izuku's teammates set him down as the other teams also broke formation. Did you get it? Ida raised his hands stiffly at Todoroki, his eyes still wide from surprise at Todoroki's sudden use of fire. Todoroki held up the million-point headband. Uraraka was crestfallen at the sight. Wait, does that mean she looked at Izuku apologetically? Izuku saw Uraraka's worried expression and smiled gently. He held up his fist, and Uraraka gasped at the fabric clutched in his hands. At the last moment, Izuku managed to grab all of Todoroki's original headbands as the other boy was distracted by the million-point one. Don't worry, we still made it. Izuku nodded his head toward the display screen, which listed the final rankings and score. At this time, President Mike announced the winning teams that would proceed to the next round. Todoroki's team was first. Bakugo's was second. Izuku's was third, and Shinso's was fourth. Izuku looked gratefully at his teammates. He didn't need to say anything. He was sure his expression told them all they needed to know. Well, at least for Uraraka and Tokoyami. 𝐻𝐻𝐼 was already gone. Todoroki. The boy with the scar turned back to Izuku's voice. What do you want? Todoroki replied calmly, but Izuku knew him well enough to detect the cold, frightening anger in his voice. Izuku lifted his hands placatingly, his voice tinged with panic. Look, Todoroki, I'm not here to, Midoriya's Todoroki interrupted, from which Izuku instantly knew that he was furious since Todoroki was usually polite and rarely interrupted people. If you were wondering, this would be the last time I used my fire. I know making me use my fire is your goal, for some reason, but you guys won't get what you want. He turned away without waiting for a reply. Izuku sighed and stared at Todoroki's figure walking away. He could hear the distant voices of his classmates behind him and the gentle shuffling of trees in the wind. Parts of the crowd in the stands were retreating for food in the 1-hour break. Izuku looked down and stared at the moving patterns of sunlight seeping through the shifting tree branches. Scenes of the cavalry battle replayed in his mind. He thought about Todoroki, then about Bakugo. Those two boys had been growing stronger way faster than Izuku expected them to. It was exciting in some way, but it also brought an overwhelming feeling of apprehension. Shoto leaned on the wall and exhaled in frustration. He raised his hands and studied them. The bright firelight flashed in his mind, and he extinguished it immediately. He couldn't believe himself. He broke his own pact. He felt pressured by Midoriya, and unfortunately using fire was the only way to win, but that angered Shoto even more. It was exactly what his father wanted. But the thought still clung to him stubbornly. When he used his fire today, it didn't disgust him. In fact, it almost felt natural even. He tried to convince himself that he was wrong, that he actually hated the fire, but he couldn't. Ida, Uraraka muttered, Deku's being weird again. Ida shook his head side to side like a robot. Sometimes I wonder what's going on in his head. Izuku's hands were placed tensely on his face, his expression a mixture of concern and surprise. And of course, he was muttering. To others, it was unintelligible, and most just gave up listening and tried hard not to forcibly shut the boy's mouth close. But in Izuku's perspective, it was truly shocking to see the pairings exactly the same. This was after the 1-hour lunch break, and the festival had continued. Just before the final round draw, 2 people dropped out. Ojiro, along with Shota from Class 1B. Izuku expected it. It was because they felt guilty proceeding to the next round while being brainwashed by Shinso. But what Izuku didn't expect was for the pairings to be exactly the same as last time, even though the drawing order changed since they got third. He thought. But although the same matchup for the one-on-one round gave Izuku an advantage, he didn't like it. Izuku genuinely did not want to fight Shinso. If he did, he would need to make a very hard decision during the fight, and Izuku didn't know if he would be able to. Midoriya Izuku. First place from the entrance exam. Such a pleasure to meet you again. Shinso's cold, stone-hard voice rang from behind Izuku. Before Izuku could turn around, though, Ojiro's tail yanked him away from Shinso. Don't answer him, Ojiro said, his voice tense. Izuku thought sadly. Thunderous applause exploded from the audience as Izuku stepped out into the arena. On the far side, Izuku could see Shinso walking out as well. "Hiyo everybody," Mike screeched. "Here comes the event that we've all been waiting for. Get ready for match number 1. Ojiro sat on the edge of his seat, even though he usually had to anyway, since his tail was always in the way, and glanced nervously at the battlefield. Uraraka looked away from her nervous classmate and focused on Midoriya again. It was hard to see from a distance, but Midoriya's expression was obviously conflicted. His eyebrows were scrunched, and his fists tightened and loosened. Why does he look so troubled? She wondered out loud. He's hesitating. A voice sounded from a few seats away, and Uraraka realized it was Bakugo. Hesitating because of what? She asked. Bakugo scoffed, his expression darkening. Who the hell knows? That nerd's always up to something. Without further ado, Mick's voice screamed after he finished explaining the basic rules to the audience. Let the battle begin. Ready? Shinso's face dimmed and contempt glinted in his eyes. Start. Class it. Shinso began, his voice dripping with venom. So that chimp with the disgusting big fat tail was from your class. What a shame for flushing his good old chances down the toilet, I swear. If all of your classmates are as him, you really are disappointing. Izuku held his ground and did not reply. His mouth was pressed into a thin line, his eyebrows furrowed. Izuku opened his mouth but shut it again. Shinso frowned at Izuku's inaction and grunted. A flicker of panic leaked from the purple-haired boy's gaze but was quickly masked away. The crowd was getting bored with the lack of action. Some were shouting for the teens to move. Get off your freaking high horse, hero course, Shinso hissed and started marching over. Izuku's mind was tearing in half. One decision could ruin everything. You think you're so powerful, don't you? The opponent said as he came closer. Shinso scoffed. You think someone who stands there hesitating like a freaking turd can make a difference? I wonder what nerve in your brain got fried that you thought you could be a hero and help anyone. Suddenly, there was a flash of green light, and Shinso felt a strong force knock him back and slam him to the ground. His head crashed onto the cement ground and a piercing pain shot through his body. He tried to take a breath and get up but he couldn't budge. Izuku was holding Shinso down to the ground in the center of the arena. Whoa! Mike yelled, what a quick plot twist. I thought Midoriya was just gonna stand there and wait to get slapped or something, but man, that was fast. The audience cheered in excitement. Hero course, if you think, Shinso started, his voice wavering. You're right, Shinso, you reminded me, Midoriya replied calmly, his conflicted expression already gone. I'm here to make a difference. His emerald eyes blanked. Shinso blinked. Shinso shoved the green-haired boy's stiff body off of him with a grunt. The audience gasped. I told him not to say anything. Ojiro hugged his head in defeat. What happened? Uraraka held her hand to her mouth. It's the other guy's quirk, Ojiro explained. Midoriya was doing a good job not responding until now. It's game over. He's brainwashed now. Get up, Shinso ordered a brainwashed Midoriya. Midoriya complied and got up stiffly. Turn around and walk off the arena. Midoriya turned around and started ambling toward the border. The audience watched in apprehension. Shinso's shoulders relaxed. He felt irritated that the hero course boy was brainwashed smack in the middle of the arena, so the edge was farther away than Shinso wanted. But it was done. He waited patiently for his victory and watched the green-haired boy walk closer to the border. Thoughts flew through Izuku's murky head chaotically. He tried to feel his movements, but he couldn't. Need a hand, little guy. A pair of crisp, bright eyes pierced the murky darkness. 7 more pairs followed suit. A bolt of lightning shot through Izuku's veins. Power surged through his body, and roaring noises pierced his mind. Then, for a split second, everything felt still. Black W-like tendrils exploded across the arena and toward the sky. A few weeks ago. The core. All Might lifted an eyebrow. The core, Izuku nodded. Wait, let me get this straight. All Might set down his tea on his office table. You want to awaken the quirks of previous users by looking for the core of One for All. Izuku rolled his hand into a fist. If I can awaken the other quirks, I can become stronger, and less people will get hurt when the fight with All for One comes. But finding the core, is that even possible? Does that exist? I'm sure it's there. The previous holders mentioned it once or twice. And how do I explain this? There's this room. A realm, inside One for All, where all the previous holders gather their power. It's just a subconscious manifestation, but, halt. All Might held up a hand and Izuku's mouth froze mid-word. Please slow down and calmly tell me the information without muttering, please. Oh, sorry. Izuku rubbed his neck in embarrassment and took a deep breath. The nature of One for All is stockpiling power, the boy reasoned, and the conference room where the users gather proves that the quirk has some sort of center where all the power, all the quirks, and all the users' consciousnesses are merged. So you think that every time we use One for All, the power comes from a concentrated core? Izuku nodded. All Might gazed at his tea thoughtfully. It makes sense, but how are you going to find the core? It can't possibly be a physical location in your body. No, but I've used the other quirks before. I know how it feels. I'm gonna try forcibly awakening them. Green lightning gathered around Izuku's body. I just need to trace back and find the source of this power. Is it working so far? All Might asked. I've tried meditating, practicing with my quirk, but not really. The hero sighed. Don't search for the source of the power. All Might placed a bony hand on the boy's shoulder, then chuckled. I have no idea what's going on in your crazy head, but what I do know is that you must search for the source of your power. When you've found what drives you, you'll find the quirks and the core you're looking for. What in the world is that? Eraser, please explain. You're destroying my ears, Mike, Aizawa muttered at the blonde next to him, but he was equally as shocked at the sight. The crowd had mixed reactions. Most gasped in surprise and awe. Many cheered in excitement at the new turn of events. Some shouts of fear could be heard. In the little corner where Class 1A sat, the students stared at the scene, jaws open and eyes wide. Bakugo stood up from his seat. Uraraka's hands covered her mouth. Todoroki sat up straighter. In a corridor at ground level, All Might peered at his successor. Holy, the hero breathed. You did not prepare me for this, young Midoriya. A hurricane of black W-like tendrils lashed and flurried and exploded around the green-haired boy. Midoriya blinked a few times and stumbled, what the holy freaking 𝐻? His eyes flew wide open in shock at the black tendrils around him. Then the pain registered. Izuku crumpled to the ground as his veins burned and black whip tore through his right hand. Shinso quickly took a few steps back as the chaotic black mess slashed closer to him. What is this, hero course guy? Shinso activated his quirk again. He had a feeling that he would be seriously hurt if he didn't stop Midoriya. You've been holding back. Izuku forced his mouth open despite the pain. He needed Shinso's help to keep the quirk, Black Whip, under control. I'm trying. His mind blanked, but not even an instant later, his mind cleared again and the pain pierced through him. Stop your quirk? Shinso ordered, but he shuddered when he realized his brainwash quirk didn't register. The black didn't stop. It didn't work. Shinso gritted his teeth when he realized what happened. His quirk is broken by any strong external force. The black tendrils were so forceful that they must have broken apart his brainwash before it even fully settled in. Izuku had realized the same thing. Shinso's quirk was still weak at this time, while Black Whip was just as crazy. Izuku grimaced in pain, still kneeling on the ground, his body quaking. Midoriya looks like he's in pain. He's not voluntarily doing this. Midnight said as she caught a glimpse of the boy through the black storm, her voice concerned. She tugged slightly on her sleeve and prepared to use her quirk. If this gets worse, someone is gonna get hurt. She watched as the tendrils struck deep crevices into the cement ground. The audience was starting to get confused as to what was happening underneath the flurry of dark streaks. Pain exploded from Izuku's arm. It was getting worse by the second. He looked up from his arm and saw the blinding, flashing colors of the stadium behind the whirling black. Then a few people caught his eye amidst the chaos. All Might, gripping the corner of the wall, staring at him with determination. Kaken had stood up some time. Izuku's friends and classmates gawked at him, with awe but also with concern. "What the hell are you doing, Deku?" Bakugo yelled. Despite the drowning noise of the audience, Izuku heard him clearly. Izuku gritted his teeth, then closed his eyes and tried to breathe. Memories washed upon him like a wave. Familiar feelings of one for all, familiar faces and voices. He remembered the time when he swung from buildings with Black Whip and Todoroki had commented that he looked like Spider-Man, and Izuku burst out laughing. He remembered when Siro and Tsuyu told him to control the tendrils as if controlling a muscle or a body part. He remembered all the times when he failed but practiced again. He remembered the first time Black Whip manifested and gone berserk. He remembered Uraraka holding on to him, screaming, "Calm down, you got this, I believe in you." Izuku took a few more deep breaths, then exhaled. The pain subsided. He opened his eyes and slowly stood up again, and saw that Black Whip had calmed down and only surrounded Izuku's right arm. On the judge's podium, Midnight let out a breath of relief and her hand released her sleeve, falling back to her side. Izuku looked back at All Might. The hero looked relieved and shot him a big thumbs up. Bakugo sat back down. Izuku looked down at his feet and saw the border of the arena only a couple of inches away. He turned toward Shinso. The general course student flinched as Izuku suddenly burst forward, green lightning flashing. So all that crazy black stuff was just a joke. You? Shinso's words were cut off as he felt himself being flung to the side like a spinning top. Black Whip released the boy, and Shinso rolled sideways. Once the world stopped tumbling, Shinso pulled himself up, his head spinning. What the Shinso blinked as he realized he was flung all the way off the arena. It all happened so quickly. Midnight snapped her WHP and declared the match to an end. Shinso is out of bounds. Midoriya advances to the next round. The audience exploded into cheers and applause. Izuku took a deep breath, and Black Whip vanished. "Shinso," the green-haired boy called. Shinso glared at him, still dusting off his sports shirt. "Join the hero course," Izuku said simply with a warm smile. Shinso's eyes widened, but then he scoffed. "Tried that at the entrance exam, didn't work." "The school and the world now thinks otherwise," Izuku replied. "It's still your dream, I know you can be an awesome hero. Shut up and mind your own business, won't you?" Shinso turned away. Well, Izuku's mind blanked. Of course Shinso brainwashed him. The purple-haired boy ambled to the corridor, a sense of defeat looming upon him. "Hey Hitoshi." He looked up at the sound of his friends. "Way to go, man. You made us Gen Ed kids proud. Oh my god, did you hear those pro heroes over there? They're so impressed by your quirk." The boy blinked a few times, then smiled and released Midoriya's brainwash. Shinso turned back toward the winner. "I'll fight you again, and I'll shove you snotty entrance exam students off your thrones when I get in the hero course." Izuku grinned, as if I'll lose. And of course, his mind blanked again. "That was crazy." All Might commented while they walked in the corridor to Recovery Girl's room to heal Izuku's arm, still sore from the earlier pain. "Couldn't have phrased it better," Izuku sighed. "I don't know how I'm gonna explain to the school what happened." got that covered. All Might grinned and punched Izuku on the shoulder. You inconsiderate brats. Wait, you got it covered, texted Aizawa. Aizawa announced to the entire stadium, not too explicitly of course, how Black Whip was just a stronger, more concentrated manifestation of your strength-enhancing quirk. The nation will listen to your homeroom teacher. Izuku nodded and thanked All Might. He kept on forgetting that Aizawa was also in the announcer booth since Mike was always the only one screaming. It surprised me a lot, All Might continued, when you described Black Whip to me. I never imagined it to be like that. Well, now you've seen it, Izuku smiled softly, but then he suddenly felt something wrong and stopped in his tracks. What's wrong? All Might frowned, his skeleton face crinkling. Izuku tried to breathe but felt his heart sink in the effort. He released a small thread of Black Whip from his shivering hand. Oh no. Izuku looked up at All Might and the hero tensed at the overwhelming dread from the boy's gaze. I made a huge mistake, the boy whispered. All Might stared at him intently, then down at the Black Whip quirk. Realization struck. Izuku stammered, his voice broken and fragile like a brittle leaf. He knows. In the darkness, only the cold, dim light from the digital monitor lit the man's gnarly face. He smiled. Welcome back, One for All. Izuku whipped his head back, and the tall, bulky figure of Banjo Daigoro, the fifth user of One for All, appeared in his vision. Izuku then registered his surroundings. He was standing in complete darkness, apart from the dimly lit, floating concrete floor. He recognized the place immediately as the subconscious realm inside One for All. The boy focused back on the fifth, the vestige's presence making his mouth sour. Izuku shut his eyes close. Why did you help me? If you just let me lose the round or maybe just manifest a day later, All for One wouldn't have saw. Whoa, hold your horses there, young man, Banjo snapped, jabbing a finger at Izuku, not the one who busted out there, being like, WhatIf expose the new holder of One for All. We're the one who searched for us and the core these past weeks. You were the one who yanked me and Black Whip out and asked for our help just now. Izuku bit his lower lip, then sighed. Sorry for blaming you, I was angry. Not at you, at myself. Banjo calmed down, lowering his finger. I know, kid. It's frustrating. Sometimes things don't go your way. You wanted to help that poor brainwasher boy reach his dream, and you instead got the attention of a psychopath villain who will do anything to demolish the entire world. But hey, you gotta see the bright side of things. Outta every single quirk in One for All, you pulled Black Whip out first. Banjo tossed his head back with a laugh. The other holders must be jealous, seeing that times you wanted quirk first. I don't think they care about those things enough to get jealous, Izuku muttered, but then it hit him. Wait, did you say both times? You know about my time travel? Duh, Banjo rolled his eyes. We know your thoughts. We see bits and pieces of your memories. Also, how else would you have discovered the core so quickly if you haven't used our quirks before? Then you know what All for One is planning to do. And how I messed up by exposing us so early on. Banjo suddenly scoffed. You're smart enough to awaken the other quirks but dumb enough to ignore the fact that All for One would have known sooner or later about Black Whip with all those eyes and ears he has around. He doesn't gain all his information from a stupid live TV channel, you know. Izuku blinked, then rubbed his face and realized that he was so focused on getting stronger and awakening the other quirks that he underestimated the enemy. Hey! The fifth holder barked, making Izuku jump. Man up, you stupid kid. So what if that villain knows that you're our successor and can access all the quirks? You can't hide that fact forever. But is that gonna stop you, from winning? I know I will win, 'cause I'll do whatever it takes, Izuku blurted. But the villain can still hurt my friends and family. I'm not strong enough to protect them now. Then get stronger, you annoying whiny child, Banjo huffed. You have us now, don't you? That's what you awakened us for. Izuku stayed silent for a while, then nodded. Now, Banjo said as his image became blurry, a wide grin spread across his face. Show the world you're here, and give someone to believe in. You're back, 𝐎𝑪𝑖𝑘A said, her face pale. Izuku sat down, confused. What happened? Todoroki happened, Ida pointed to the arena. There was a mountain of ice blocks that the teachers were hurrying to clear away for the next round. It was so scary, 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵 said, her soul not yet settled back in her body. The round started, and the next moment there was a wall of ice an inch away from my face. You didn't get to see it, man, Kirishima said. That iceberg was so huge. Zero lost the round in less than 2 seconds. Why weren't you here, then? Ida asked Izuku. I didn't think you were hurt really bad from last round. I fainted, Izuku replied half honestly. Right after realizing that All For One saw Black Whip, he did faint, since he had the conversation in the spiritual realm of his quirk. I guess using Black Whip was a bit tiring for me. Black Whip, Bakugo said in a low growl. Another secret. But seriously though, it's so dope. Kirishima beamed. It's gonna be an epic round, between you and Todoroki. Izuku smiled at the compliment and looked away. The door squeaked open and 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵 watched as Midoriya and Ida walked in. How are the rounds going? She asked with a weak smile. It's a stalemate between Kirishima and Tetsu from Class B right now, Midoriya replied. How are you feeling? Terrified, she said honestly. Nobody walks out unharmed from a fight with Bakugo. Surely Bakugo won't use the full might of his quirk on a female opponent. Ida asked. He will. Midoriya said simply, then turned to 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵. Her heart dropped at his expression. His bright green eyes were filled with concern. Kaken won't back down, and you might get hurt, Midoriya said solemnly, but just remember to keep going. You're much stronger than you realize. And I can speak for Kaken. I know he respects you and sees you as a worthy opponent. Bakugo respects me, 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵 said incredulously. It's true, Midoriya nodded, so show him what you got. Her words were cut off as the green-haired boy pulled her into a hug. Be careful. You got this, he said and pulled away. She felt her cheeks heat up at the brief embrace but nodded and gave the 2 boys in the room a big thumbs up. Thanks guys. I'll see you in the finals. She pressed her trembling fingers together. Release. The audience roared in surprise as the rubble, previously floating high in the air unnoticed, rained down. Bakugo didn't even flinch. The icy calmness that settled over him since the cavalry battle remained. He lifted his arm toward the sky and focused on the falling cement, then released his quirk to its full extent. The force of the explosion blasted 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵 away, and she flew backward. Pain racked her body as she tumbled on the hard ground, bits and pieces of blasted rubble flying everywhere and whizzing past her. She felt the arena ground underneath her shake violently at the explosion, or maybe all the pain and exhaustion was making her hallucinate. The rubble blasted away, and some pieces disintegrated into a shower of dust. 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵 was sprawled on the ground, her body aching as she struggled to move. Bakugo stood calmly at his original position, eyes devoid of sympathy. Throughout the entire round, she wasn't even able to touch him, let alone attack. She thought. Suddenly she heard Bakugo's voice mutter something almost inaudibly. Should have expected it, he scoffed. Spending time with Deku probably means you've got those annoying plans too? She felt hopeless. But she couldn't give up. Deku told her to keep going, and it wasn't just an empty suggestion for her to do her best. It was an affirmation. Like anyone else here at this festival, she wanted to become a hero. Bakugo scowled as 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵 heaved herself up from the ground. He growled in annoyance, stretching his hurting arm to prepare his quirk again. She stumbled but stood up on quaking legs. Bakugo wouldn't have been surprised if she simply crumbled at the spot. Why do you hate Deku so much? She asked, her voice trembling with exhaustion and a tinge of exasperation. The question caught him off guard, but his scowl returned. The way the girl stood in front of him now, it reminded him too much of that stupid nerd Deku in his childhood years. Battered, but standing nonetheless. None of your business, pancake face. Now let's finish this. He stepped forward and pulled his arm back, sparks flying from his palm. She clenched her jaw and lifted a slab of broken concrete, weightless from her quirk. He blasted his explosion at her, and she met the attack with the concrete, which blew apart in pieces. I understand that Deku keeps secrets, but that doesn't mean he's not trying his best all the same, 𝐎𝑬𝐼𝐵 suddenly shouted, So if there's anything that he taught me, isn't to make a bunch of strategies, it's to work for what you care about, no matter what. You're as annoying as he is. Everyone wants to be a hero here, even me. She yelled, her voice still shaking, but full of determination. I'm the one standing here now, not Deku. She rushed forward and Bakugo prepared to confront her, but her legs finally gave out and she crumpled on the ground. He waited for her to crawl back up again, like the roach she was, but she didn't move. Uraraka is unconscious, Midnight announced, raising her arm. Bakugo proceeds to the next round. Bakugo stared at the unconscious girl. Her words echoed in her mind, and they irritated him. Even worse, her words exposed him, exposing his own thoughts deep down and yanking them to the surface. Since some point in time, all he could think about was that he hated that DMN nerd and he needed to beat him. Since some point in time, beating Deku had become Bakugo's subconscious image of winning, which meant that Bakugo had at some point in time accepted his own defeat. As Bakugo made his way up the stairs, bushy green hair caught his attention. Hey nerd, he snapped, making Midoriya stop in his tracks. If you thought I made up Uraraka's plan just now, you're wrong. It was all her. Midoriya said quickly. Bakugo lifted an eyebrow. I'm not stupid, Deku. The way she acted, only an idiot would still think it's your plan. Why are you looking at me like that, scumbag? Midoriya blinked and shook his head. I just didn't expect you to say that. Bakugo scoffed, then continued on his way back to the audience stands, passing the green-haired boy. I'll beat your butt up in finals. He didn't wait for Midoriya's reaction and simply walked away. On the other hand, Izuku was gaping. Did he just imply that I'm going to finals? He muttered. Was that acknowledgement? If it was the old Kaken he knew, he would have said something along the lines of, too bad you're gonna die next round. Everything felt so weird. It was as if the fight with Uraraka was a tipping point for his childhood friend. Izuku shook his head. Suddenly, Izuku slammed into something and realized he bumped into a person. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. His words stopped once he looked up and saw Endeavor, the number 1, no, number 2, hero. There you are, the fire hero said gruffly, the bright orange flames twitching as if displaying his irritation. I've been looking for. May I help you? Izuku replied, then mentally slapped himself for forgetting that the worst thing you can ask Endeavor is whether or not he needs help from a frail teenager. Luckily for Izuku, Endeavor ignored the question. I saw what you did back there. Your quirk is very impressive. Thanks. Your speed is phenomenal, and those black whatever those are extremely powerful as well. Izuku knew where this conversation was going. Endeavor continued. Your teacher on the speakers mentioned it was a super strength quirk. Considering your performance and the nature of your quirk, you are a worthy opponent for Shodo, as his life goal is to surpass All Might. Izuku tried not to roll his eyes. I assume that you will follow these compliments with an encouragement to give my best in this fight with your son. Precisely. As your son's classmate, Izuku said calmly despite feeling irritated at the hero's overbearing attitude. I think it's obvious that as long as your son uses his fire, he will definitely surpass All Might. Endeavor raised a flaming eyebrow. But the reason he doesn't want to use his fire, well, you probably understand it better than I do, Izuku said with an innocent shrug. From the speakers, a voice announced that there was 1 more minute till the start of round 2. Excuse me, I have to get to my next round. Izuku bowed slightly and hurried away. It was nice meeting you, Endeavor, sir. Endeavor huffed and turned away, not bothering to reply. Izuku arrived at the stadium and entered the arena as the crowd, once again energetic after the break, cheered at the 2 contestants. Hi Todoroki, Izuku said at his classmate from across the arena so they didn't just stare at each other awkwardly. Todoroki just frowned at him, which made things even more awkward, but Izuku was more or less used to it. Finally, the countdown began. Izuku took a deep breath, then concentrated on his opponent and his own quirk. This was an important fight. But unlike last time, he was going to win. Ice blast. Another mountain of ice rose from the ground. Izuku dodged in the direction of Todoroki's left once again. But by the 3rd time Todoroki had learned. Ice shot toward Izuku's right, forcing him to dodge away from Todoroki's fireside. Almost immediately after, another attack shot straight toward Izuku's face. Reacting fast, Izuku whipped his arms together in a defensive position that shielded his face, the motion creating 2 gusts of wind that blasted apart the iceberg aimed at him. "Midoriya, you're just determined to force my fire out again, aren't you?" Todoroki said through gritted teeth. "What? Did my father bribe you or something?" "I'm not trying to pretend I understand what's going on between you and your father," Izuku said. "That's none of my business." "You're sure acting like it is. I just don't respect your half-assed attitude toward all of this," Izuku said with a frown. "At least for me, becoming a hero is not something where I only put in half of my effort." "You sound a bit like Bakugo, you know," Todoroki observed. "He's not wrong about putting in effort." Spears of ice jutted from the ground, and Izuku broke them off easily. "It's not about effort," Todoroki snapped. "I'm going to prove to my father that I will win without his power, and I will do all I can to achieve that." Izuku rushed forward, snaking around the spikes and mounds of ice separating him and his opponent. More ice rose. Izuku broke off more with a few strengthened kicks and punches. Not long after, the arena was scattered with ice blocks here and there. "Sorry, 𝐸𝐸𝐸, Izuku muttered, "but I'm gonna have to borrow your move here for a sec." Dozens of black tendrils instantly shot out from Izuku's fists and grabbed the bits and pieces of broken ice. Then, with a yell, Izuku heaved his arms. Some of the tendrils held onto the ice blocks and slammed in every direction. Other ice pieces flew at Todoroki, some as big as cannonballs and others like knives, as Black Whip flung them out like projectiles. With a grunt of annoyance, Todoroki lifted his arms, and a frozen wall the height of a 3-story building rose before him, blocking the projectiles. But Izuku was delighted at the opening. A faster, taller wall also meant a thinner wall. He quickly lifted his finger at Todoroki, took a deep breath, then released his quirk. Point focus, a black tendril the width of a pencil, enforced with one for all, blasted toward Izuku's opponent with the speed of a bullet. Todoroki dodged as fast as he could as the tendril penetrated the ice like a spear and shot past his head. He realized that the WHP-like quirk left cracks throughout the barrier, weakening it. At this moment, Izuku lifted his other hand. He laughed at himself. He flicked his finger, and a blast with the force of a hurricane shattered Todoroki's ice shield as if it were no stronger than glass. The force blew Todoroki off his feet, and he tumbled back. Izuku lowered his hand. A strand of black whip was wrapped around the finger he flicked, which had prevented him from shattering those bones from the strong blast of power. If only he could have done this the first time he fought Todoroki. He almost felt the pain in his hands just thinking about it. Before Todoroki could recover fully, Izuku took his chance and darted at the boy with a high percentage of one for all, his legs also reinforced with black whip, wrapping around like armor. When Todoroki finally focused back on Izuku, it was too late to summon an ice attack. The green-haired boy was only inches away. On his left side, Izuku first saw the blinding light, then the searing heat as the flame exploded in front of his face. With a sharp breath, Izuku dodged the fire before it could cook him. Once he backed up to a safe distance, Izuku could smell the smoke from his singed hair. But what surprised him was the sight in front of him. An enormous flame, even larger than the one in the cavalry battle, blazed from Todoroki's left side. "This is what all of you wanted, isn't it?" Todoroki seethed with anger, pain pouring from his expression. "Well, see him. See my father over there. He achieved his goal. The pain he brought upon my family, it's all gonna be worth it for him now." Izuku didn't even look at Endeavor. All he could see was how vulnerable Todoroki seemed right now, despite the threatening heat of the flames. "Todoroki," Izuku shouted, "that's not what your father achieved, unless you make it to be." "I thought you said it's none of your business," Todoroki uttered, his bottom lip twitching. "This fire belongs to you," Izuku snapped, emotions flooding. He had witnessed Todoroki accepting his power and using it to become one of the strongest heroes he had ever met. If only he could understand that. Stop surrendering to it. The emotion in Midoriya's voice shocked Todoroki. It bewildered him and it amazed him. Ever since his father started training him and destroying his family, he had believed otherwise. This fire would never truly belong to himself. But Midoriya, a boy he only met since school started, seemed to believe in him with a sense of certainty that he himself didn't even have. And for that moment, Shoto felt a weight lift in his heart and seemed to forget about his father. Deep down, he just wanted to become a hero like All Might, like so many other hero students around him. So like everyone who stood in this arena, he had one goal only: to win. Todoroki lifted his left arm, and the flame doubled in size. Midoriya leaped back, and the green light of his quirk brightened as well. Both of them knew things only just started. Todoroki burst forward, the previously cold air heating up dangerously. Emerald light flared around Midoriya, the atmosphere around him seeming to tense at the sudden increase in power. Using his momentum, Todoroki lashed out his left arm, along with a torrent of fire, toward Midoriya. The air around them expanded at the sudden change in temperature, releasing a strong blast of energy on par with Midoriya's previous attacks. The energy exploded forward, and Cementos had to quickly conjure a tall concrete wall to shield the audience from the shockwave. But instead of meeting the attack head-on with a blast of his own quirk, Midoriya leaped off the ground, the floor fracturing under him, and flipped in the air so he was right above Todoroki's head. The fire blast passed under Midoriya, its heat wave exploding upon him. The small flickers of flame that he couldn't dodge burned through his shirt and made his skin scream in pain, warning him not to get any closer to the fire source. Todoroki's head whipped up, but the black tendrils had already wrapped around Todoroki with frightening speed. His arms were bound to his sides, unable to reach up and attack his opponent. For once, the possibility of failure seemed dauntingly real for Todoroki. He remembered that in the first round, Midoriya had flung his opponent out of bounds in a blink of an eye. But Todoroki was not about to let that happen. Summoning as much power as he possibly could, Todoroki imagined all the rage, all the potential, bursting out from him in an instant. Almost impossibly, the fire exploded upward, growing even larger than before. The black tendrils around Todoroki flickered and warped as the heat weakened Midoriya's focus on them. Izuku's face twitched in surprise, but years of training and heightened reflexes from his quirk kicked in, and his mind searched for solutions. In the short time to react, he had limited options. So he kicked. Kicking in thin air was unsettling, and this wasn't exactly a practiced move, but Izuku assumed it would have the same effect as kicking off of solid ground if he was lucky. He was not lucky. One for All strengthened the kick, letting loose a powerful blast of air, the recoil force propelling him forward and away from the fire. But the force lacked precision, and Izuku realized with a jolt that it was too strong as he hurtled toward the ground, face down. Reacting fast, Izuku dropped into a roll to soften the landing, but the sudden shift of focus loosened Black Whip, and Todoroki broke free. Despite his plan to fling Todoroki out of the arena not working, Izuku couldn't help but grin. Todoroki was even stronger than he remembered. Izuku drew more energy from One for All, and the light around him visibly grew brighter. "You were still holding back," Todoroki said, the fire still growing to Izuku's surprise. "You underestimate me." "Nope, just trying to save some bones," Midoriya replied in a factual tone, then drew his arm back, and also, to wait for the best timing to strike. Building up power, Izuku infused his quirk in every single muscle in his body. He recalled his training, keeping his motions as concise as possible so that his quirk didn't destroy his body through any excessive movement. One for All coursed through him, and he felt his body straining at the raw power. Black Whip wrapped firmly around his arms and legs, but Izuku braced for the impact. He threw the punch. A shockwave with power comparable to All Might ripped through the arena toward Todoroki, blasting apart pieces of concrete and leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Izuku felt multiple bones in his body fracture at the force, but he gritted his teeth and pushed away the agony. Todoroki had responded with a blast of fire, but it did little to weaken the blow. Todoroki was knocked back, and he tumbled toward the edge of the arena. But before Todoroki could fall out of bounds, the fire disappeared, and he was slammed to a sudden stop by a small wall of ice he conjured just in time. The force probably broke a bone, but at least Shoto didn't disqualify. Almost immediately, Todoroki's fire reappeared and blasted toward Midoriya, who was darting at his opponent with crackling arcs of green lightning surrounding him. With a WHP of his arm, Midoriya let loose another gust of wind that blew Todoroki's left arm away from Izuku. The fire swept away in the current. The shockwave was not as strong as before, but it still left Izuku's arm racked in pain, and the wall of ice supporting Todoroki fractured in pieces. Then, before Todoroki could retaliate or defend himself, Izuku's kick slammed into his body, and Todoroki felt himself fly back and crash to the ground. Todoroki is out of bounds. Shoto suddenly heard Midnight's voice shout. Midoriya proceeds to the next round. Thunderous applause sounded in the stadium, and the audience cheered enthusiastically. Shoto lifted his head slightly off the ground and realized that his entire upper body was outside of the marked border of the arena. With a sigh, he lay his head back down. His body throbbed in pain from where he collided with his own ice wall, but it was frustrating to know that it was in vain. He lost anyway. "Hey," Midoriya's voice sounded from above. "Nice round?" "Easy for you to say," Shoto grunted a reply, then looked up at Midoriya, who extended a hand. Shoto sat up, barely noticing that the left side of his sports uniform was burned away. With another sigh, he grabbed Midoriya's hand, but before Midoriya could pull him up, the green-haired boy shrieked in pain. "Gah!" Midoriya his trembling arm back. "That hurts a lot more than I thought it would." Shoto shoved himself off the ground. "I barely landed a blow on you," Shoto said, merely stating a fact. "What's with all the pain?" Broke some bones, tore some muscles," Midoriya replied with a stiff smile. "It's kind of an inconvenient side effect of my quirk." Shoto couldn't help but feel surprised. A quirk that could easily break the body, training to become a hero with a quirk like that, I can't imagine, Shoto said with a slight frown. He had always known that Midoriya was a lot stronger than he looked, with fighting expertise and analytical skills easily comparable to a pro hero. But it must have taken an unimaginable amount of hard work and endurance as well. Midoriya just shrugged, slightly wincing at the pain. "I know that ultimately, my body will grow strong enough to handle the full power of my quirk. It's just gonna take some time." Shoto nodded, looking down at his left hand, the fire not yet extinguished in his mind. "It's just gonna take some time." Izuku's classmates greeted him when he came back to their little corner of the stadium. "Congrats for winning the match." Kaminari patted Izuku on the back. "Thanks." Izuku made his way back to his seat, but I think Todoroki deserved a much higher ranking. "Still, though, you gotta be proud of yourself," Siro said. "I literally lost my round against Todoroki in 2 seconds. So honestly, he could have easily demolished any of us out there, but you sure made defeating him look straightforward." "Todoroki is really strong," Izuku said. "I only won because he has relatively less expertise in his fire." "But you forced it out of him," 𝐎𝐼𝐺 pointed out. "By the way, how are your wounds now?" "You know, recovery girl. I'm feeling much better now." "You broke your bones again, right?" "Just like the entrance exam," she sighed. "People will start thinking that self-destruction is your default mode." "Recovery girl already does," Izuku said with a shrug. "Also, Ida just won the match against Shiozaki from Class B," 𝐎𝐼𝐺 said. Izuku nodded, "which means I'll be going against him next." Ida Tenya marched onto the area for the 3rd time. He couldn't help but feel proud, a buzzing excitement mingled with nervousness tying a knot in his chest. He was not going to let his brother down. On the other side of the arena, Tenya spotted his friend, Midoriya, whose bushy green hair bobbed up and down in the breeze. As usual, Midoriya's mouth fluttered as he muttered to himself in an unintelligible way, and Tenya wondered for the millionth time what was happening in his friend's mysterious brain. But whatever Midoriya had planned, Tenya would do his best to win. 3, 2, 1 start. Tenya's engines whirred to life and burst forward toward his opponent. When it came to long-range attacks, Midoriya had the upper hand, so Tenya's priority was to close the distance. He mentally prepared for anything Midoriya might do in response. Maybe Midoriya will use his new Black Whip move to bind Tenya, which would be easy to dodge. Or maybe Midoriya will just demolish him with one of those all-might-level hurricanes. But none of the attacks arrived. Midoriya stood still in his place, not attempting to dodge or attack. Instead, his sharp gaze studied Tenya's movements, And for a moment Tenya felt exposed, as if all his possible moves and thoughts were written down in a script, and Midoriya simply had to glance at it to predict everything Tenya would do. At the audience stands, the 1A students were also confused. What is Midoriya doing? Kirishima squinted at the arena. He's throwing his long-range advantage away, Yaoyorozu analyzed with a frown. If Midoriya simply let Ida get close, it would be purely a competition of close-range fighting skills and speed. When he got close enough, Tenya blasted off the ground and his kick propelled toward Midoriya at breakneck speed. Green lightning surged around Midoriya and he sidestepped to dodge Tenya's attack, but Tenya still managed to graze Midoriya's arm. Giving no time for his opponent to recover, Tenya immediately twisted around and sent another kick flying at Midoriya's face. This time, Midoriya stepped towards Tenya and blocked the kick with his arm, then followed it with a swift punch, which Tenya barely ducked away from. However, any person with a brain could see that Midoriya was holding back. A lot. I have no idea why you're treating this like a sparring match, Ida leaped back, but since you're not taking this seriously, this is ending now. Midoriya simply lowered his stance and raised his fists in a seemingly relaxed manner. However, what Ida didn't realize was that Izuku had never been as focused as he was then. His eyes were fixed on Ida, his attention so concentrated that everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. He followed every movement Ida made, analyzing, predicting, and reacting. Of course, if he just used the brutal power of One for All or Black Whip, he would probably win this match easily. But to Izuku, Ida was more than a simple obstacle to overcome. Izuku's goal wasn't just to win the sports festival. Recipro burst. He could hear Ida's engines suddenly accelerate, and in the blink of an eye, Ida had launched himself toward Izuku like a comet, a bright blue line of fire trailing behind him. Izuku saw it coming. But even though he saw it coming, it still came upon him with a speed that made his shoulders tense and his stomach drop. Before Izuku could do anything to react, he felt himself get knocked back violently and all of a sudden his surroundings were zooming away from him. He tried to grip the ground but everything was moving too fast for him to see clearly. Izuku told himself, his jaw clenched. He strengthened his body with the power of his quirk, but immediately after, he felt the energy being channeled upward and for a split second, he felt a familiar sensation, not unlike the piercing feeling of danger sense, the quirk of the fourth One for All wielder. However, the feeling was clearly not danger sense or any other of the dormant quirks but was instead a strange shift in One for All's power-storing ability. But none of that was important now. Izuku decided to save his questions for later and focused on the feeling before it faded away. He concentrated HRD on the blurry image of his opponent and simultaneously heightened the power of One for All. He imagined his senses heightening and energy shooting through his attention like a bolt of lightning. Then everything stopped, at least it seemed so. Everything was suddenly moving so slowly. Or, more accurately, Izuku could see clearly now. He could see everything. And for a brief moment, he thought he was able to see the cracks on the ground, the nearing arena boundary line, the movement of Ida's engines, the lonely cloud drifting in the sky. Then Ida tripped. It was a violent tug at his leg that sent him crashing to the ground, and he lost his grip on Midoriya, whose momentum sent him tumbling forward, skidding to a stop dangerously close to the arena border. What the? Ida whipped his head back, only to see Midoriya's black W tightened around his leg. Ida's gaze followed the other end of the WP back to Midoriya, where the black tendril sprouted from the green-haired boy's trembling hand. Not just his hand, Midoriya's entire body was shaking as if he was just electrocuted by Kaminari's quirk. But his unwavering green gaze shone with a chilling perceptiveness. How Ida struggled to connect his thoughts. Recipro Burst was his fastest move. Probably the fastest move in the entire festival. And Midoriya reacted to it, somehow found the perfect timing between Ida's steps to tie his leg and yank him off balance. Why oh? What just happened? Mick's excited voice screeched through the speakers. Midoriya Izuku just tripped Ida in the blink of an eye. Was it a lucky coincidence or did Midoriya actually react to Ida's crazy fast move? With a strong jolt, Ida broke free of Midoriya's quirk and sped toward him. Ida couldn't let his surprise distract him. He could still win. He pushed his engines to go as fast as they could and kicked toward his opponent, who was still trembling. Izuku augmented his focus with his quirk again, and Ida's movements were again presented to Izuku's vision like a frame from a paused video. Before the audience realized it, Midoriya had already countered Ida's attack with a punch to the shoulder, then immediately followed it with a kick to the stomach. But before Midoriya could land the third blow, Ida had learned. The boy with the engine quirk started his attack with the motions of a kick, but promptly changed its direction, ducked low, and jabbed at his opponent's ribs with his elbow. Midoriya's eyes widened, but he still managed to block the blow, the light of his quirk blazing like an emerald fire. Then green-haired boy quickly glanced down and realized that he was merely an inch away from the boundary. "All right, I think we've done enough for today," Midoriya uttered. With a swift movement, he spun on his heel and shoved Ida outside the boundary with a powerful burst of his quirk. Ida crashed on the ground, then felt his heart sink when Midnight's voice announced his loss and Midoriya's advance to the next round. The cheering of the crowd never seemed so deafening. Ida heard Midoriya's voice and looked up. To see the green-haired boy's trembling hand. Ida took it and his friend pulled him back up to his feet. Ida sighed, "I admit my defeat. No matter how hard I tried, you just seemed to be a step ahead of me." Midoriya just nodded absently, his gaze staring off into the distance. It wasn't until the two of them made their way off the arena and back into the building did Midoriya talk again. "I'm glad we had that round just now." Ida listened to their footsteps for a moment longer, then pushed his glasses into place. "I'm glad to. However, I do wonder, why did you deliberately choose to fight close range?" Midoriya considered the question, then said simply, "Because I wanted to learn. Reciprocal burst is one of the fastest moves that I know. If I can learn to face it directly, maybe I'll stand a chance against even faster villains in the future." Ida nodded. He felt a little frustrated that Midoriya seemed to be using him for personal training purposes like a tool, but Midoriya wasn't the only one who gained valuable experience from the fight. Ida chopped an invisible plank in the air with his arm. "Even though I lost to you today, I will still do my best to catch up with your improvement." "Thanks," Midoriya said with a slight smile, which confused Ida because he couldn't think of why his friend would reply with thankfulness to his last statement. However, only as Ida studied Midoriya's expression more closely did he realize something wasn't right. "Hey Midoriya, are you okay?" "Why Midoriya?" Ida lunged forward to catch Midoriya just before he crumpled to the floor. Immediately, small robotic nurses scurried to the two boys, and two robots carried an unconscious Midoriya to the infirmary. The first thing that Izuku felt when he woke up was the headache. When he blinked to open his eyes, the mere action of tilting his head sent a wave of throbbing pain from his temples. "Midoriya. He's awake." Izuku pressed on the side of his head and used his other arm to hoist himself up to a sitting position. He realized he was in Recovery Girl's infirmary, and standing near his bed were Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, and Recovery Girl herself. A couple of other 1A students were bunched up near the door. Skinny All Might stood gloomily to the side like a scarecrow. "Okay, all right, you kids should give him some space." "Yes, all of you." Recovery Girl waved her hand at the students, and they left the room reluctantly after wishing Izuku to feel better soon. After the students left the room, Skinny All Might closed the door gently, then turned back to Izuku with a stern expression. "What did you do this time?" the hero asked. The concern in All Might's voice surprised Izuku. All Might, will ask questions later," Recovery Girl interrupted Izuku, then handed the boy a cup that seemed to have some sort of herbal tea in it. "Drink this," she said, "it'll help you feel a bit better." Izuku obeyed and took a large sip from the cup. The warm tea seemed to relieve some of the headache pain. "You have a headache, right?" Recovery Girl stated rather than asked. "My quirk helped you relieve the worst of it, but as you know, it doesn't work as well as healing physical injuries. It'll go away soon. It's not a big problem." Izuku nodded, the movement of his head shaking up another wave of pain, but not as bad as when he just woke up. But, her voice suddenly grew 10 times as serious, "Your headache was an after effect of something much more problematic." "What do you mean, ma'am?" "You came in here with no physical injuries apart from some minor scrapes. Your BLD sugar is fine, you're hydrated, and you had no other problems that would have caused you to pass out for such a long time. With my quirk, I could have also aided your body to return to normal in less than a couple of minutes. How long was I out? 20 minutes? All Might replied, Bakugo's round with Tokoyami ended 10 minutes ago. The short break before the final round was supposed to end around now, but because of your situation, the final round is being delayed for another 15 minutes. If you don't recover before then, you will be disqualified. You were supposed to be disqualified right now, but because you had no physical injuries, I managed to persuade them to wait a while longer, Recovery Girl snorted. Thanks, don't you thank me. She suddenly snapped, surprising Izuku. Please consider the severity of this situation. As you know, my quirk boosts your body's own self-healing ability to recover your wounds, but it barely worked on you this time. That means that your body struggled to heal this injury itself, which means that you were messing with my nervous system. Izuku finished the thought. Neurons were typically the hardest to repair. What happened? All Might asked, his tone softer this time. Izuku took a deep breath, then explained his new discovery. He told them how he was able to harness the power of his quirk to directly strengthen his sensory input and heighten his reaction. That's impossible. All Might shook his head. I specifically tried that before when I was younger, and it didn't work. Ever since I started training the core of One for All, and especially after I awakened Black Whip earlier today, my control over the quirk has changed dramatically, Izuku explained. And look what you did because of it. You nearly fried your brain. Recovery Girl huffed. Izuku gulped down the rest of his tea, but now I would know what to do when facing even faster villains. No. Recovery Girl said with finality, you may never use this technique ever again. You're fine now, but it's only because you used it for a short moment today. Who knows what will happen if you use it for even a second longer? The consequences would be detrimental. Izuku wanted to object but stayed silent. He was frustrated. Something that should have made him stronger could have killed him in the process. I'm sorry, was all Izuku could manage. Recovery Girl seemed genuinely angry this time, and Izuku felt bad for worrying her and All Might like this. All Might sighed. Young Midoriya, your longing to get stronger and willingness to do whatever it takes is what makes you a great hero. But don't let that be your downfall. People in the future are counting on you. I'll never harm myself in this manner again, Izuku promised, and he meant it. He raised his gaze to All Might, realizing his headache was much better now. Just like when you trained me for the entrance exam, the only way to get stronger is by doing it one step at a time. All Might nodded, then peeked at the clock on the wall. Izuku peeked at it too, then tried not to stare at Recovery Girl. All right, I know that expression, Recovery Girl sighed exasperatedly. You still want to go to that final round, right? If I'm allowed to. I'm feeling a lot better now. Izuku did in fact feel recuperated, but he didn't want the healer to think that he would be off killing himself again. You may go. Really? Recovery Girl waved her hand toward the door, and please do not come back in here. Katsuki looked away from the crack in the ground that he was staring at for the last 20 minutes and closed his eyes with a sigh. He was leaning on the hard, cold wall of the stadium entrance, and he could hear the spectators complaining about the lengthy delay caused by Deku's sudden collapse. However, Katsuki kept on waiting patiently, because he knew that Deku was gonna show up no matter what. Even if that meant waiting.